I've been staging residential property homes in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 3 years now. I visit just about every neighborhood and every price range, from like $700 studios, insane I know, to $8 million homes. I usually never know the history of the property or the current sellers, but sometimes I do get insight from real estate agents that the family is growing and needs more room, the daughter is selling her pasted parents' home, a divorce, etc. I have, only on a few occasions, felt some not so welcoming energy in homes, I guess you could say. Maybe I walk a little quicker out of a room, or maybe I think that I saw someone walk past me through a doorway when there was nobody there, but nothing really threatening or anything. That is, until today. So I'm sitting in this really nice empty home overlooking the ocean in San Francisco, just leaning against a wall in a room off the living room. The movers are outside loading the furniture into the garage to prep for our stage in 3 days. As I sit there in this quiet, empty home, up against a wall with a bathroom on my right and a closet to my left, just looking at my phone, I hear the most guttural, deep and high-pitched growl or scream come directly from behind me. Now, I'm up against a wall, so there is nothing but the bathroom and the closet behind me. I paused and sat there for a minute, and then got up to look out the windows thinking that it must be a dog outside or something, but there was nothing. I immediately felt very uneasy and suddenly frightened. I leave the house and wait with the movers, closed up, and I just left. I have never heard anything like this or felt so unwelcome in an empty home. So, I was deep in the backcountry of the Rocky Mountain National Park while backpacking with a group from the camp. It was a long hike to our first campsite, so everyone was exhausted when we got there. I had quite a few friends get on the program with me, so we spaced out in a few tents around the campgrounds. After we ate dinner, we all agreed to take it easy that night and go to sleep. A few hours after everyone had gone to bed, though, I awoke to heavy footsteps approaching my tent. A moment later, I heard my friend's voice silently call my name. He asked me to go with him to the bathroom. It was protocol for a camper to bring a buddy to the bathroom at night, in case something happened, but the buddy was supposed to be from your tent. I told him to get someone from his own tent to take him, as I was tired and extremely cold. He continued to insist that I went with him, but again I said no. He sounded extremely frustrated, but eventually gave in and left my tent. As I listened to him walk away, the only footsteps that I heard were heading into the woods around our campsite. There was no tent zipper, no whispering about somebody else accompanying him to the bathroom, just heavy footsteps slowly walking into the woods. It was then, too, that I had an uneasy feeling after that, but I slowly went back to sleep and eventually I woke up in the morning. In the morning, too, I asked him if he got someone else to go to the bathroom with him, but he said that he never woke up that night. Throughout the hike to the next campsite, I asked his tent mates if they heard him leaving or entering their tent, but they said that they never woke up. I asked my friend again if he remembers waking up that night, but he said that he's positive that he didn't. After that, my first assumption was that he was sleepwalking, so I asked him if he had a history of doing that, but he said no. After that, I started to think about how odd the interaction between me and him was. What I mean is that his words were a bit slurred, and he kept insisting that I go into the woods with him. To this day, I still wonder about that event and exactly what happened that night. For context, I live in the woods of southern West Virginia, deep in the Appalachian wilderness. I'm an hour and a half away from any large city, and another 30 minutes from the nearest Walmart. Needless to say, I'm in the middle of nowhere. Yesterday I came home to a strange feeling that I was being watched. I thought that it might have been coyotes, so being the homesteader that I am, I sat outside with my gun and LGB, livestock guardian dog, and waited for them to come for my chickens. My dog was alerting me to the presence of something, but when he would get close to where it was, it just seemed to disappear. He would stick his nose in the air and catch wind of where it was and run to it, never finding anything. Fast forward to tonight, and I have the same feeling. I take my light outside and shine it at the edge of the woods, and that was when I notice eyes staring at me. This is odd too, considering that my 150-pound LGB is going nuts, barking and looking for this thing, and it's sitting still, not moving. I walk right up to it, and I see a bobcat looking me dead in the eyes from 10 feet away. It looked away from me and walked around a tree, completely not paying attention to me. Now, for those who live in the city, bobcats are extremely rare to see, let alone come within 10 feet of shining a light directly on it. I pulled my pistol out to shoot it, and it didn't go off. I racked it back and tried again, and still nothing. It felt like something was holding my trigger back almost. I ran inside to get my shotgun at this point, and I followed it into the woods about a quarter mile before I finally lost it. Keep in mind, it never once ran from me, but instead walked slowly, as if it was trying to lead me somewhere. When I came back out with the shotgun and followed it into the woods, as soon as I crossed the wood line, fog rolled in as if someone had a fog machine and was aiming it right at me. I mean, I couldn't see 5 feet in front of me. About the time that I turn around to come home, I see through the trees faintly my fiancé standing on the porch, looking back and forth from me and a spot far away behind my house in the woods. I came back down, and she was freaking out. She said that she heard me screaming, like screaming murder for her to help me. She said that I was screaming her name and helped me from well over another quarter mile from where I actually was. She came outside to help me when she saw my light in the opposite direction of where she was still hearing the screaming coming from. During this whole thing, I never heard screaming once though, and I obviously never screamed myself. However, I had the constant feeling of being followed and watched that entire time. But I could never find out what was doing it. The night is young though, and quite honestly, I'm sort of expecting things to get a bit weirder tonight. If anything happens, then I'll be sure to post an update, but do wish me luck. I'm 17 now, but this happened from when I was roughly 5 to 8. Because this happened so long ago, I'm sure that there are a lot of things that I've forgotten over time or unintentionally blocked out. But around the time that I started kindergarten, we'd moved to a complex where I got a room of my own for the first time. I remember being scared to have a room all to myself, so I would always make sure my closet door was firmly closed, because I was pretty scared of monsters in my closet. I think this might have stemmed from my mum watching a lot of horror content around me, or maybe just a general childish fear, I guess. I do remember it being shortly after we had moved in, though, that I woke up when it was dark out, and I could tell by my window that was to the right of my bed. My closet door opened, and this boy hovered, very low to the ground still, maybe an inch off, given that he seemed about my height or size, but didn't make a sound as he walked out of the closet and walked in a straight path from my closet to the window, but he stopped midway at the foot of my bed and just seemed to stare at me. His face was like melted glass, similar to the longer-faced ghost kid from Caroline. Sorry if you don't know that, but that's the only example that I can think of. But he wore a sailor suit, very similar to the results that you get for searching 1950s boys' sailor suit. I remember wanting to scream, but for some reason I couldn't. I hid under my blankets for a long time, and I don't remember what happened after that, but I assume that eventually I must have fallen asleep. Now, it might have been a few days, or maybe even a week, but I saw him again shortly after this. It was roughly the exact same encounter, so it doesn't stand out in my brain, but over the course of a few months, I had the courage to look back at him. I was very scared, but he would never do anything, and I think that I knew that. I mean, he never attempted to climb on my bed or anything or get closer to me. He only ever stopped and just sort of stared at me, and that never seemed to change. After I started looking at him, I learned that after he left the foot of my bed, he would go to the wall on my left and form a hole in my wall that he would then go through. I remember there were a few times that I would get up in the morning and try to see the portal or whatever it was, but of course it was never there. There was a long time of build-up too, but eventually I just wasn't scared anymore, and I remember the feeling of not being afraid when I looked back at him. After I wasn't scared anymore, I was able to get out of my bed right after he would leave and try to go through the portal, but it would close before I could get to the wall. I remember one specific night though where he just didn't show up, and I got confused because by that time it had become a routine to see him every night. I got up and looked out my window to see him feeding the deer on the property. Deer are pretty common in this area. He didn't look up at me or anything, but I remember just sort of staring at him. After we moved away from the complex, I never experienced anything close to this or ever had him appear in a dream or anything. Other small details I want to add as well is that he only seemed to exist in the complex. He never appeared in my school or daycare or anywhere else. My mum told me a few years ago that neighbors in the complex would tell her that I would play games by myself, but seemingly pretend that I was playing with another person. But I myself have no memory of that, so I don't know how reliable that actually is. From what I remember, no other kid in the complex experienced anything similar to this, including my two sisters who shared a room across from mine. I would tell people about the boy that I would see, but they all reacted a bit weird. It's also taken me a long time to come to the conclusion that this was probably paranormal, so I guess I just wanted to share it, and I want to know if anyone has had any similar memories that they carry with them. Like I said, my memories probably changed a bit over time, so take everything that I said with a bit of a grain of salt, but what I do remember very clearly is that there was this boy and he would come into my room every night. So, to give you a little bit of background information on this story, I would like to start with the fact that I'm European. I've shared another story a couple of months back about something that happened to me in Tuscany, Italy. As for me and my friends in this story, well, we're from Spain, and when this happened, end of September 2023, we were fairly new to the US. I moved here a while back for law school, and so did my friends. We'd been living here for a few months and decided to explore the nature of this beautiful continent, as we all live in New York City. So, long story short, we decided to go on a road trip to Canada, drive around Lake Ontario, and then drive back to New York City through upstate New York. I'm a male and my friends were 3 females. Their names are Lisa, Anna, and Charlotte. And everything went super smooth until the last night. So, for our last night, we had rented an off-grid cabin in a remote area in the woods in upstate New York. To give some locals an idea, we were like half an hour drive from Harrisburg, I think. Me and Lisa had decided to spend one night in this cabin because it was one with nature. The cabin was super old, made from logwood, and there was no running water or electricity. Both me and Lisa had experience with survival in the wild in Europe. I, for myself, had been a Boy Scout my whole life and even was a scout leader for a while. Our other 2 friends were, as much as I love them, purebred city girls. They had pretty much zero experience with camping or to just be in place where there's no service for the phone or whatever. as was the case in this cabin. We had been driving all day to get there, and when we reached the beginning of the forest, it was already past 10 p.m. and was really dark that night. While driving to this place, we lost internet connection with the GPS, and so I had to drive to the cabin on intuition paired with a good old-fashioned map, hoping for the best while trying to drive safe on these muddy trails. It was also rainy the whole day as well. On the way there, Anna and Charlotte were in the back of the car, and the moment that they lost phone service, they got pretty uneasy for the rest of the ride. All of a sudden, though, in the pitch-black darkness of the forest, we all saw a campfire, but there were no houses around or people. Just a campfire. A well-organized one, since the fire was not spreading, and it was not as big as a bonfire or anything. It kind of startled all of us, as this was a little bit weird since there was no one around and we were really deep in the forest already. Plus, it was getting pretty late at this point. But when this happened, we also reached the end of the trail, and we figured that we'd taken the wrong trail at a crossroads before or something. So I turned around, and we were on our way again. Half an hour later, and a couple of wrong trails later as well, we finally had arrived at our destination, as we could finally see the first glimpse of this godforsaken cabin in the middle of nowhere. To give you a bit of an idea of just how old it was as well, the potty was made out of wood and was outside of the cabin. When we arrived, it was still raining, and both Anna and Lisa were definitely not in the mood for getting out of the car, and getting in the cabin with zero lights was freaking them out too. So me and Lisa left the lights of the car on and went inside the cabin, while also using our phone flashlights to check the cabin out and see if we could find any old flashlights, which we did in the end, and to see if we could turn on the fireplace, which we didn't because all the wood was still wet from the rain, and it seemed as if nobody had prepared dry wood anywhere as well. So with a couple of old flashlights and a small improvised fire, I managed to make in the stove, and we all four got into the cabin, and I started to make some pasta for us. Meanwhile, the girls were preparing the beds and closing the windows since it was already cold in this part of the state. The cabin had a small ladder which led to an elevated room or space with a bed where all three of the girls could fit in, and I would sleep downstairs in a bunk bed that seemed older than the First World War. While making pasta, Anna, one of the city girls, came up to me and, knowing that both Lisa and Charlotte did not like to hear anything scary at night, told me that she had seen an old cemetery in the middle of the forest on the way to our cabin, and that she had seen a figure walking around there. I first laughed it off as nothing, as I mentioned in my previous story, I do not consider myself a big believer of scary stuff. Being from Spain, we take promises very seriously. To swear on God is very serious for us, and she swore that she was not lying. I told her that I believed her, but that there was really no need to panic, as I would lock all the doors when we would go to sleep at night. We had some pasta and managed to make a couple of s'mores, which are lovely by the way, and drank a couple of beers, or at least I did. They all just had one. I can assure you that I'm not a drunk after a couple of beers, and that I would never start to hallucinate or anything too. I'm just saying this in case anyone thinks that I saw stuff because of the beer or whatever. But they all three went to sleep pretty early after finishing the s'mores and their beer, and I, considering that I really love the outdoors, and that I don't really mind a little bit of rain, decided to take my last beer and a flashlight outside to the front porch, also very old and made of wood, and sat myself down with my beer while enjoying the sound of the rain and the lovely sight of not seeing a single light in the distance. I could greatly appreciate this coming from New York City, and I just scanned the area around with my flashlight. There was really not much to see, I guess, but there were a lot of trees and a small creek a little bit further away. All I could hear was the wind, the rain, and the running water down in the creek. That was until I suddenly heard what I would describe as a weird sort of roar. The first thing that came to my mind was a bear, but I had researched pretty well before our trip, and I knew bears were not common at all in this part of the state. I also know what a bear roar would sound like, and it just didn't resemble that. except for the fact that it was a deep roar, I guess, if you get what I mean. But startled, but not really scared, I guess, I continued to scan the rest of the forest for as far as I could see from the porch. And it was then when my eye caught the glimpse of a figure, well hidden deep into the tree line. I would describe the figure as tall. As a reference, I'm 6'4", and I thought this thing was at least a foot or two higher than me. It was well hidden because it had brown fur. That's what I think it was, at least, or the skin in any case. It blended in well with the trees in autumn. It was definitely aware of our presence, as I saw two eyes glimpsing into my flashlight. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I swear that it was not a bear. Whatever it was bipedal and had rather long arms, I would say. We looked at each other for what seemed like an eternity, but it was probably more like 5 seconds before it just suddenly vanished behind a tree, and I heard another roar. It was then, too, that I felt all of the hair on my body stand up, and I was definitely very much scared. I went inside as quick as I could, and locked all the doors and closed all the curtains. I quickly went to bed and tried to wave it off as just my exhaustion of driving all day, playing tricks on me, but I promise you that whatever this was, it was real. After an hour or so, I had finally calmed down and I went to sleep. The rest of the night was pretty uneventful, really, and the next morning when I went to relieve myself, after having drank beer the night before, the weather had cleared up a bit and it was pretty sunny, and as far as I could see, the forest was calm and beautiful again. No sight of any animals or anything abnormal. We had a nice breakfast that morning and left for our way back to the city that never sleeps. And so ends also my story of that night. I never talked about what I saw that night because I know all three girls did not like to hear scary stories. And I figured that after all these months that this was the best place to share it. If anyone has any idea of what it could have been, then feel free to enlighten me, especially if it's backed up with rational reasoning. Something tells me, though, based on those long arms, that whatever it was not common to the area. This happened about 8 years ago now, almost to the day in fact. So, I was living in one city and working in another city about 20 minutes away. Since then, the areas between have been hugely developed, but at that time, everything between these cities was just undeveloped back roads with nothing around. No buildings, no sidewalks, no lights, just rough old roads until you get into the other city. To get to work on time, I had to leave my house at 3:30 in the morning, and one morning I jolted awake at 3:20, full of adrenaline as I realized that I only had 10 minutes to get myself ready and set my dog to be alone while I was at work. Needless to say, the circumstances had me highly alert, rushing and focused. Also, I was driving a lot faster that day, but I drove down this road every day as I went to work. I usually take that time to wake up, but this time I was wide awake. All I could think about was what would happen if I ended up being late for work. I was really anxious when suddenly my headlights shone up on something in the distance ahead of me. Now, what I saw was a naked, skinless man crossing the road on foot. When I say skinless, imagine those diagrams in your life science classes, everything beneath the skin revealed and intact, except in this case with a sort of shiny, wet appearance, bright pinks and reds all over, like literally a living, skinless person. No clothes, no shoes, and notably appearing oddly content. He seemed strangely at ease considering that he was crossing the road into nothingness in front of a speeding car in the dark at 3:45 in the morning. There was no walking space suitable for humans out there for like miles as well. And the area that he was walking into was pitch black, nothing there but weeds and rocks. The direction that he was coming from, the same. No light, nowhere to roam, nothing. Now, like I said, I was sober and super awake at this point, so I have no doubt in my mind that I wasn't hallucinating or tripping or anything. But I have no idea what it was that I saw that day. It was 1998. I was 8 years old and visiting my dad's childhood home. The town where he grew up was so small that you could drive through it within 10 minutes. I still remember the smell of steak from the mum and pop owned restaurant, the sweet cookies from the bakery, and even the cigarette smoke from the hair salon that my grandma used to run out of her basement from 15 years earlier. The house, it had to have been built in the early 1900s. The floors creaked and there were vines all over the front of the house that my dad wanted to get rid of, but my grandma liked the way that they looked. It gave her privacy, she said. My brother slept in my dad's old room, which was primarily blue. I remember the Chicago sports team posters on the wall, edges torn and frayed from time and the occasional water damage. Out of the two remaining rooms, I chose my grandmother's linen room and my parents took the spare room downstairs. I remember the room being sort of frilly. White frilly curtains matched the white lace comforter on the bed. Her sewing machine in the far right corner, in front of the window where she would watch my dad play in the backyard. My dad playfully whispered, "That's the haunted room, you know." My dad was and still is a bit of a jokester. I remember scrunching my nose at him and put my suitcase on the floor in front of the bed. Little did I know, though, that he wasn't kidding. My biggest worry was that I would wake up in a puddle from my 4-year-old sister who shared the bed with me that night. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, though, and sort of looking around. Everything was dark except for the dim light that came from the bathroom down the hallway. The shadows from the sewing machines hit the wall and looked like boxcars. I turned over to face the left side of the room, and that was when I saw her. At first I thought it was my mum, a silhouette of a woman who was standing in the doorway of the room. She was wearing a white dress. My mum didn't wear dresses, not even a nightgown. She had long fine hair, and my mum had the typical fluffy 90s do-cut at her shoulders. I quickly realized that this wasn't my mum, and panic suddenly set in. She was all white, skin, hair, dress, everything. I remember that she also had a sort of subtle glow about her. She was leaning on the doorframe, watching us sleep. Her head was tilted to the side, resting on her right hand that was being supported by her elbow against the frame. I guess I could say that I wasn't scared, but she was terrifying, but sort of comforting at the same time. It was sort of like she was watching her own children sleeping, lovingly. I remember closing my eyes and praying that she wouldn't come near me, and she never did. The next morning, I went to the kitchen where my grandma was already awake, making us breakfast, waffles with several different syrups and a huge bowl of assorted fruit. I didn't talk or eat much for the majority of breakfast, and my dad definitely took notice. After a few minutes of coaxing, I finally told him what I saw, and he immediately looked at my grandma and said, "See, I told you." This is a recollection of a campout that I had a few summers ago, and the exact details have started to become fuzzy, but I'll try to relay it as best as I can. So, it's a Boy Scout camp, northern Wisconsin. I'm sure you can probably guess which one. It's got a smiling tent as a mascot. There's maybe a little over a dozen of us, some scout leaders too, all within a little clearing that makes up where one of the many troops are set up. 2 boys to each tent at this point. Me and my best friend from very, very early childhood are tent buddies, and on maybe the 3rd night at this camp is when this happens. So, I remember falling asleep pretty normally. It's dark, and I wasn't the last one to leave the campfire after dinner. Me and my friend both were in our sleeping bags on opposite sides of the tent. Our bags are at our side and our hiking boots right by the door, carefully removed when we entered the tent. Eventually, I wake up to strange sounds, hard breathing or maybe soft grunting or whatever. It's the dead of night, like 2 or 3 in the morning. Must have been around that time. I'm sort of frozen and I look around at the walls of the tent, but nothing seems amiss. Just this heavy, low breathing sound. It was then that I see my buddy is awake as well, and we're both frozen and terrified. He starts to say something, but I put my finger to my lips and make the shushing gesture. Behind his head, where he was laying, something is brushing up against the tent, poking into the artificial fabric, almost sort of antler-like. I also could have sworn that I heard someone say, "Hello, is anyone there?" My friend then sees this and lets out a small gasp. Something pokes through the tent suddenly, sharp and black. A loud exhale, and then whatever it was just steps back. We hear branches crunch and twigs snap, fading into the distance. We stay awake for another hour, and in hushed whisper try to rationalize what the heck just happened, asking if we should check outside the tent. We both don't remember falling asleep again, but we wake up in the morning. The hole in the tent is there, along with 3 to 4 more similar ones on various sides of it. By the time the other boys in the camp were waking up, I had the courage to check around the tent to see if there's any footprints, broken twigs, or something to determine just what was outside of our tent. And behind our tent were bare human footprints. They circled around our tent several times, but never did they lead to or from the tent. Just 3 to 4 rings of footprints that looped around it. We asked around to see if anybody had actually pulled a prank on us, but everyone that was there swore that they hadn't. Whatever happened, me and my buddy talked about it a few times on that trip, but these days, we refuse to talk about it again. So I'm 19 years old, female, going on 20 next month. This happened when I was around 4 years old. When I was young, me and my parents and my brother were living in an apartment before we moved to our own house. My grandmother was visiting often and was taking me and my brother out to a park to play. My mum and grandmother were avoiding most of our family members and neighbors at that time. I didn't understand why, but they never let us play with other kids. We had one neighbor, female, that my mum was avoiding the most, though. She was a really sort of angry old woman, I guess you could say, from what my mum was telling me when I was young anyway. I was around 4 at the time, like I said, so I was still sleeping in my parents' room in a small baby bed. It was one of those beds with a sort of little side fence on it. I was sleeping in it because I was and still am a very small individual. I didn't grow much. The bed was next to the corner where the window was, and I was, and my parents put water on my windowsill in case I needed it. They knew that I was smart enough to take care of myself, even at that age. One night, though, I woke up really thirsty, so I stood up on my feet to reach for the bottle to drink, but it wasn't filled with too much water, so I planned to wake up my mum to help me. I knew how to get out of this baby bed without falling or injuring myself. Next to the small bed was a nightstand, so I was sort of hopping off the nightstand and then to the ground. Next to the nightstand was my parents' bed. My mum was sleeping, facing my side that night, so I walked up to the bed to wake her up. But when I reached the bed and wanted to wake her up, I just all of a sudden couldn't move at all. I was stuck in place, over my mum's side of the bed. I tried to move, but I just sort of couldn't move a muscle. I could only breathe and watch over my mum sleeping. And then something made a sound under the bed. I could tell that that's where the sound was coming from, so I looked down, only with my eyes obviously, because I couldn't move my head. And what I saw, I will never forget. There was this hand, a pitch black hand, like a shadow, but I could tell that it was real. Now, I know that there's a myth about little kids being able to see things that adults can't, but I swear that this thing was real. It was moving, kind of crawling on the floor to reach me. I was telling my brain to move, but I couldn't make any sound either, because I tried to scream to wake up my mum, but just nothing came out. The hand reached for my feet, and when it touched me, whatever it was burning. It started crawling on me and it burnt me. The hand was way too long to be a human arm. All I could do was stay there and pray that I would wake up from whatever nightmare this was. When the hand reached my neck, right before it touched it, my mum moved in the bed, and right after that I was able to move backwards too fast, and so fast that I hit the little bed and my mum woke up. All of a sudden I could move again, and instantly I started crying. My mum woke up immediately and asked me what happened, but I was crying so much that I couldn't explain anything. My mother took me in her arms and tried to calm me down. After that, she put me back into bed and she went back to sleep. I took one last look at my mum's bed, and the hand was not there anymore, but it looked like it just disappeared in the shadow from under the bed. Eventually I fell asleep, and the next morning my mum woke me up, desperately screaming at me, "What did you do?" I remember her taking me to the bathroom where she undressed me from my pajamas. She left the bathroom for a moment to bring new clothes, and while she did that, I took a look at my pajamas, and they had black stains on the front of them, right where the hand had touched me. The material also looked sort of a little bit burned too, in some places at least. After this incident, I started to have more experiences like this too. Once, right after this one, me and my parents, my grandmother and brother, went on a vacation to the beach. My parents were staying in a room, and me, my brother and grandma in another. The memories are a bit foggy from this vacation, but I remember that I would see people covered in black sludge on the beach, and I would just start crying. My grandma also told me about this when I was 16, and she told me that when we were in the hotel room, I would start crying and not get too close to the bed. When she would ask me why, I would always reply with "monster." Another encounter with this thing was when me and my brother were playing alone in my parents' room in our apartment. I was playing in the middle of the bed thinking that I'll not get snatched by whatever that thing was if I was over it. My brother was on the carpet, playing with some cars. We had a sort of road-type carpet sort of thing, and I forgot about this memory until one day me and my brother were talking. I was 17 and he was 16. It was some sort of late-night type conversation that we had, and we started to talk about paranormal things. When all of a sudden he asked me a question that honestly made my heart drop. He asked me, "Hey, do you remember the black hand from when we were young?" After I heard this question, the memory started to flow back again from that day when he was playing on the carpet. I could see it clearly in front of me. He was playing on the carpet and the hand was there right next to him. I was terrified when I remembered. It wasn't just in my head after all, he saw it too. And I mean, I'd never told him about it. In fact, I never told anyone about it. So, whatever it was, this was confirmation enough to me that it was real. After this conversation too, I started thinking more deeply about the whole thing, and I came up with an idea to tell my grandma. You see, my grandma is a witch but is not practicing it. Not too much anyway. She was doing curses and spells when she was younger, you see. But with time she stopped and only did card readings and protection spells. So when I told her about this, she got really pale and seemed to be in shock. She explained to me that she believes that it was a spell, a curse for my mother, made by that old lady that was our neighbor when I was young. Apparently it was not meant to hurt me but my mum that night, but somehow I saw it and walked right into it first. She told me that I could have died that night, but my energy and the protective spells that she put on me helped me. I don't know about that, but after this I sort of understood a lot more about my life as well. why I started to have nightmares after the incident, why I was getting sick so often, why I had to go to the hospital too many times that I could count, why my life was so miserable up until this day, the bad luck that I have and everything. Everything began to make sense because of this. So now I'm asking, what do you guys think about all of this? Do you think that it's something related to a paranormal thing or witchcraft? Or was it just my mind playing tricks on me because I was young? I'm pretty confused about this, and I really need some answers. And if you have any ideas as to what I can do about all of this, then please do let me know. I had to make up some time, so I opted to stay late at my desk and finish up some work. I'm only here making up time because I had to leave my office during the day for an event for my kid at school. But about 45 minutes ago, the last person who stayed late left the office and I saw him walk out, so nobody else came in and there was nobody else here. About 30 minutes ago, though, I heard a loud bang come from upstairs. It sounded like metal pipes hitting together hard. It kind of startled me as I thought something fell. I went upstairs to see what might have fallen over, and nothing. I looked out from the upstairs window, and the parking lot is empty except for my car. I called out if anyone was still there, that I might have missed, but there was no one. Our office isn't open to the public, and you need a key to even enter. I returned to my office, and shortly after that I came back to my desk and worked on a file, and then heard another noise this time, and it sounded like something dragging, like a broomstick across a wall or something. I went to check, but still there was no one here. Now, we have motion sensor lights, so all the lights upstairs are now off. Most of the lights downstairs are off as well, except for my office. And just before I got on here to share this with all of you guys, I hear a ding, like some kind of cash register ding, but we don't have anything like that. But after I heard that ding, I saw that the lights upstairs came back on. Now, those lights are only triggered by humans. No mice, cat, dog, or the office Roomba would trigger it. And just now, as I'm sharing this, another set of lights just came on closer to the office conference room. I really don't know what's going on here, but I don't like it, and I'm going to leave for the night. I swore that I would never be that parent who doesn't believe their child when they share a paranormal experience. It sucks to have something scary happen to you, only to have your mom or dad dismiss it as a dream or your imagination. But when my son, 10 years old, told me what he saw, my knee-jerk reaction was to ask if it might have been his imagination, because I just didn't want him to be so frightened. I asked him to swear that he was telling the truth. He's not one to make up stories in the first place, but he swore that this is what he saw, and he's still pretty shaken up by it. So he was sitting in the living room and heard a noise coming from the hallway. It was a flapping, crinkling sound like a tarp. He saw a tall black figure wrapped in this tarp, and he said that it wasn't a shadow. He could see light reflecting off of the black material. He described it as a tarp because of the crinkly noise that it made. But whatever it wasn't flapping freely. The tarp was stuck to the body, and he could see the shape of the head, neck, and body. He couldn't see feet, but he said that it floated by and it wasn't walking. He saw it glide or float across the hall, presumably from my room, and it went into another room and out of sight. He was obviously terrified and instantly ran away. So, has anyone experienced something similar to this? And we call it the Black Tarp Man, but I mean, what the heck is this? My son is already terrified to sleep in his room because of a lot of weird noises that happen in that room. I've heard the sounds as well, and they are a bit weird. I normally don't get frightened by pretty much anything, but the last 3 nights I've freaked myself out thinking, what if I do look up and see Black Tarp Man next to the bed or something? Then I always cover my head with the blankets like I'm 5 years old again. When I was a teenager, I went on a vacation with my extended family. This was around 2008, back in Pakistan, where I'm originally from. We're a very tight-knit family, I guess you could say, so I had my father, mother, sibling, uncles, aunts, cousins, and some of their families, etc. with us. It was a big group of people, and we were staying at my late grandfather's giant wooden house in our remote village. The place is surrounded by trees and rivers, and everything else, markets, shops, other people, are pretty far away. Anyway, all of us somehow managed to fit in this house, so around 20 plus people sleeping in 7 to 8 bedrooms. I was sleeping with my father in a long horizontal room at the front of the house. The room had 2 beds, one on each side, and a central walkway that sort of penetrated the room vertically in the middle. This walkway was basically the entrance to the main part of the house. So, the actual siding was pretty short. We were sleeping, but I suddenly woke up, maybe a few hours after midnight, I would guess. I'm usually a heavy sleeper, so there must have been a noise from within the house, but I don't remember hearing anything. I was still half asleep, but I could sense that there was some type of unrest in the house. I looked to my right towards the walkway, and when I did, I saw a man. Now, I don't know if it was a man or not, but this man-shaped thing was standing there, maybe slightly moving, I would guess. He looked to be around average height and build, but the weird thing is that he was entirely made of light. Like, I still remember that he was just light, but man-shaped and moving. Now, the next part of this is a bit embarrassing for me, but I actually just went back to sleep immediately afterwards. I didn't get up to check, I didn't feel like I had to, I guess. I just saw him, turned over, and fell asleep. The next morning, I start my day without even thinking about what happened yesterday. I just assumed that I'd had a dream about this man made of light. And you can imagine my shock when I learned that literally everybody in the house was convinced that someone had broken in yesterday night. I asked for details, and I learned that every adult in the house woke up for some reason. Maybe noise, maybe something else. This part is still a bit unclear to us, I guess you could say. And they convened and came to a conclusion that someone had broken in. Obviously, they were scared because burglaries are common in this area. However, it was a big group, and they apparently decided to search the entire house that night. And by search, I mean really search every nook and corner, under the beds, old cupboards, storage units, upstairs, downstairs, everything. They apparently did this for at least an hour or more, and my father said that they didn't leave one single place unturned. My father grew up in this house, so he knows it pretty well, along with my uncles. The results of the search expedition, they didn't find anything. They were thoroughly convinced, though, that there was something in the house, but nobody could find a thing. Of course, I immediately told them my story, and they all believed it. Everything was too weird to be a big coincidence, but we all sort of moved on and went on with our lives after the vacation ended. The most surprising thing to me, though, even to this day, is that I wasn't scared by what I saw. I mean, I distinctly remember how I felt when I saw this light man, and fear was not what I was feeling. In fact, I wasn't feeling anything. I felt like we were where we needed to be, and so that's why I just rolled over and went back to sleep. So this story took place at my house, where I still currently reside in upstate New York, Clifton Park. If I had to put a year to it, I'd say it was around 2011 to 2012-ish time frame, which would put me at around maybe 7 years old. Now, I remember that I was outside in my front lawn just playing around in the little red wagon that I used to have, and I remember that I had family over. After a while of playing, I remember seeing this tannish, sort of beige-ish pickup truck pull up on the sidewalk next to my lawn, and there was an older man in it. I'd say mid-40s, early 50s, and I remember him saying something like, "Hey, want to help me find my lost puppy?" Now, I was raised by good parents and taught stranger danger, so I dropped everything and ran inside, and after I did, the truck drives away and I never saw that guy again. I told my parents what happened, and I remember them saying that they had me trying to describe the color of the truck by pointing out like a similar color on a candle that we had, and they ran outside to find the guy, and obviously they didn't see him. Looking back on it though, it still seems incredibly strange to me. I mean, I was around 7, so I could have just been scared because I was taught stranger danger, but I also think that it's kind of weird to ask a 7-year-old to help you look for a lost puppy and not ask an adult instead. I go back and forth on it a bit. I really don't know what to think of it now. I mean, there's a possibility that he was harmless, but I don't know. I don't think that that was the case. So I, a 22-year-old male, decided to stay in a Motel 6 for one night in the southern NH area. I had back-to-back hospital shifts, so it really wasn't worth it to drive 45 minutes back home just to do it again 6 hours later. So I checked in at around 11:15 p.m. and went to my room. Of course, the door refused to open and the key ended up snapping in half, probably because it was 10 degrees out, so I had to go back to the office to change rooms and get a new card and all that. My new room actually did open, and it was pretty clean overall. I didn't see any major issues with it. I try to get some sleep, but I wake up at about 4 in the morning to people arguing somewhere in the hotel. I genuinely didn't think it was possible to be so unbelievably loud between two people. This argument seemed to go on for what seemed like forever as well, until finally they eventually shut up. However, about 15 minutes later, I hear someone trying to force their way into my room. I had both locked and latched the door, yet the door somehow was cracked open, and the latch was definitely about to give out. And it definitely would have opened fully if I hadn't have said "get out." Between the cracks, I just saw a dark figure in maybe a hoodie or a jacket, but the instant that I said that, the door closed and the person seemingly ran off. Now, I would have opened the door and confronted them, but I didn't have my gun on me at the time. I genuinely have no idea what could have happened if I was fully asleep and didn't hear them open the door, and that is really something that I don't like to dwell on. It was the first and last time ever that I'll be staying at a Motel 6. For the love of all that is good, no matter how much money you're saving by staying at a Motel 6, please just stay at a regular hotel. I promise you, it's definitely worth it. I'm 29 years old, and this happened when I was about 10. It does need some backstory because my childhood was very paranormal-centric in a way, so bear with me. So my mum and I have always been horror movie fans. I can't even remember far enough back to a time when I didn't like horror. We also live in Jacksonville, Florida, which is about a 45-minute drive from St. Augustine, the oldest city in the US and probably also the most haunted. All of this naturally progressed into us becoming very interested in the paranormal, so much so that my parents formed a ghost hunting team when I was about 9. I wasn't allowed on the big investigations, but I was allowed to see some really cool places. One house that we used to go to often was in Blackshear, GA, and the family there became lifelong friends even when they moved to Kentucky. They were even on an episode on Dead Files. I have a lot of great memories from those days that I'll probably never forget. But one of the scariest memories is one that I'll also never forget. My parents and I went on a trip to California because my dad had to go for work and we all went. While he was doing his meetings, my mum and I visited Disneyland, and it felt like a really fun vacation. One evening during that trip, the three of us went on a ghost tour at the Queen Mary. I don't remember much of that tour because it was a little bit boring. Mostly the tour guide doing knock once for yes, two for no kinds of questions in haunted areas. The stories were fascinating, and the energy there was extremely sad and also very oppressive for me. One of the stops on that tour was the first-class swimming pool and its attached dressing room, which essentially just looked like a public bathroom with stalls and no doors. This area definitely had the worst energy of the whole ship, but there was supposedly some kind of mean trickster spirit that hung around there or whatever. And I think that I experienced that spirit when we were there. So we were in the dressing room and the tour guide decided to try something. She had one person go into each of the stalls of the dressing room, and she told everyone to turn off all the flashlights and cameras and just sit there and see what might happen. As soon as the room went black, within a few seconds, something grabbed my upper arm and exhaled straight into my ear. I mean, I felt the warmth and everything. It scared me to death, so much so that I immediately yelled and came running out as the lights were turned back on, and I actually cried for my mum. I've heard recently that around that time is when they blocked off that area and stopped doing tours there as well. And while I don't think that something that happened to me would have been the sole cause of it, I can't help wonder if either it was my experience that made them stop tours in there, or that something like that happened to others and they decided to close it up for safety reasons. I know that this has stuck with me even to today, and I watch a lot of paranormal investigators on YouTube, and I watched one where someone was able to get into the first-class pool, and I instantly could feel that energy again. It felt almost like a panic attack sort of feeling. It was a terrifying encounter for me, and I vowed to never go back there again. But I think that I may do it for a sense of closure, I guess. I don't know if I'll get the chance to, but it certainly would be interesting. This didn't happen to me, but to a friend of mine who witnessed a bizarre moment with his friends in the woods. This would have taken place around 2006 in Cornwall, in the UK. I was a part of the alternative crowd back then, but had a few sort of towny chav friends as well, one of which was a guy called Richard. For those that don't know, the towny folks tend to be the run-of-the-mill working class types who are a bit rough around the edges, but as a rule very down to earth. Zero interest in paranormal as well, unless they can snort it or steal it. But Richard is at a party in a place called Baldu Woods one night. Side note as well, Baldu Woods is infamous for being associated with all manner of occult practice, from witches and warlocks to devil worshippers. This was due in part to there being a south-facing church in the woods. But allegedly all sorts of nefarious activity occurred in and around this place a long time ago, but not within the last 20 years or so. Not that any townie would be interested or even bothered by these anecdotes. Two completely different worlds, really. But anyway, Richard and a group of 15 to 20 people were partying in the woods one night. There was some alcohol and drugs involved, but not for Richard and a couple of other people who were driving that night. They made a bonfire and drink was no doubt flowing at this point. They partied until around 1 a.m. when they decided to move on to a house party in a nearby town. They put out the fire and then started to make their way out to the woods. Now, there's a lot of trails through Baldu. It's a popular woods during the daytime, but Richard left the path to go and take a pee against a tree at one point. He didn't venture far, literally just a few meters off the path, behind some bushes and up to this huge tree. He started doing his business and then heard the creaking of branches above him. He stepped back and looked up to see a huge black mass falling down towards him. He jumped back and screamed, causing the group to come storming through the bushes, and they all witnessed what had fallen from 40 or 50 feet above the tree line. It was a huge black object, moving and twisting on the floor. It was smooth, shiny, and the way they described it resembled a bin bag. They didn't say that it was a bin bag, but that's just the closest thing that they could compare it to. It writhed back and forth though, seemingly not interested or even aware of the group. Regardless though, they didn't stick around. They stared in fear and disbelief for a few moments, and then ran back to the path and to their cars. Now, Richard really isn't prone to flights of fancy. He has no interest in anything otherworldly or paranormal. When he told me this story, he was dead serious about it and had a sort of fearful, confused demeanor about him, which was very out of character. Also, at least 15 other people witnessed it too, and I have no reason to disbelieve this account. Two things he noted though that really stuck with me. One was the size of this thing. He compared it to my brother. My brother is 6'4" and was around 120 kilos back then. Hefty lad. But it didn't really have the shape of a person, he said. Just a big mass. Like a very large person was put into a huge bin bag. The second was apparently the lack of noise that it made. It had fallen from a height of almost 50 feet and landed on the hard woodland floor, but there was no heavy breathing, no grunting, growling, or yelping, no moan or cry for help or anything. In fact, no sound apart from the noise that it made from writhing around on the forest floor. And that is really weird. I've always been a bit of a sensitive person, asking questions that no small child should know, predicting people's behaviors and consequently being ignored only for it to come true later, having dreams that end up happening, and never having sleep paralysis. Now, my family had recently inspected a house to move into, and upon stepping into the threshold, I just said no, not this one, absolutely not this, and refused to enter any further. I sensed danger and waited outside, probably coming across as a grumpy teenager. We moved in anyway, and I finally get my own bedroom, which I was afraid to enter. It just felt wrong. Worse than anywhere else in the house, not including the basement even. From there, things started to go downhill as well. My brother, who is very mentally ill, can't sleep anymore, shouts and gets into anxiety-induced frenzies far more often than he ever did. My mum, who had previously been harsh towards me whenever my brother acted up, started to get even angrier as well. So angry, in fact, that it escalated to physical violence and hours upon hours of screaming, bursting into my room, and generally being someone that I couldn't recognize as my mother anymore. My sister, she became completely disassociated. She'd blame me for angering my mother, and in turn my brother would join the shouting matches. This never happened previously in our old home though, and it coincided when I started waking in the night to see a man standing inside my bedroom by the window. Some say that he was the Hatman, but I never saw a hat, and he was always in my room, never on the threshold, and I would always move. What I mean is that I wasn't in a dream state because my coping method was to immediately roll over when I saw him. I started regularly having to burn sage in my room, and on those nights I'd be able to sleep peacefully. The only saving grace to this entire household was my dear beloved parrot, whom I named Lenzo. He was with me all the time, lived in my room at night after I started saging, and followed me about on my shoulder. Then there was this, lull of activity. I found out that my mum brought a priest into the house because she was experiencing a man in her room now. It didn't last long though, because the man came back. And this time, when I saw him, he was closer, by the end of my bed rather than the window. So I rolled over and eventually came face to face with the man looking into my eyes. He'd somehow moved so quickly that when I rolled over, he was able to look me right in the eyes as if to say, "You can't pretend I'm not here." I don't want to describe his face because, honestly, it sort of freaks me out. But he had blue eyes, and that's as much as I'm willing to share. And he did actually speak too, quietly, in a way that felt like I was sort of imagining it, I guess. But he said, "I'm going to kill Lenzo." I couldn't scream, my voice was gone. However, I pulled my blankets over my head, rolled over, turned on the light, and got out of the bed. I immediately started incensing the room in true Australian fashion, started cussing this thing out of pure rage and fear. I can't remember what I said exactly, but it was something like, "Over my dead body, you ugly freak. Show yourself in the light and fight me right here, right now." Obviously, nothing happened. I really don't want to say too much, but what I will say is that an accident happened. Lenzo's sidebar entrance to his cage was in perfect working order, and it had broken off of its hinges on the one day that no one was home, and I returned to find that the neighbor's cat had somehow got inside the house and, well, yeah, you can imagine the rest. My mother said that she never forgot the sound of the screams that I made upon seeing what had happened. And to be honest, I don't really care if anyone believes me or not, but I refuse to chalk any of this up to nightmares or sleep paralysis or something like that. There's just more to the goings-on here. I've always wanted my own dog. I put a lot of research into it and decided to get a Burmese mountain dog, which my mum graciously paid for part of as a graduation present. One thing to know about this breed, and my dog in specific, is that they are very friendly and don't know a stranger. Before getting him, I saw videos of the same breed just napping while repair people came into the backyard. This was not an issue for me. I mean, we have a very protective St. Bernard at home, and I didn't think that we needed a second guard dog. And as I wanted to be able to take my dog out, it was better for him to be friendly anyway. So around October, when a chill was just starting to form in the air, a friend and I, we decided to get some pumpkin-flavored coffee for us and a pup cup for Sirius and go to a local park to get him some exercise, now that it wasn't too hot for him outside, and to smoke some as well. This is not one of the nicer parks. It used to have a dog park attached to it, but due to flood damage, continuous as well, it was closed down, and now the area where it used to be is mostly secluded. And there's plenty of people who use that to their advantage, and do drugs there as well. There's also lots of families on the weekends that go there as well, but this was the middle of the week during school and work hours, so the park was pretty empty when we got there. As we walked past a man who was training for something that I'm not sure that I'd like to know about, to be honest. He was carrying a full army pack and was drenched in sweat. And when I later told my stepdad about this, he said that he had seen the same guy running along the main road where there are no sidewalks. Sirius completely ignored him. We also met a couple who had a Rottweiler puppy a few months younger than my dog, and we stopped to let them play for a moment and talk to the couple. Sirius had absolutely no issues with the pair and was very happy to receive pets from them as well. Eventually, we got to the location we were planning to smoke at, directly underneath the train tracks, which is the most secluded location in the park. There's only one path to get to it, unlike the rest of the park that sort of loops around. This area used to be a road, but it was purchased by the city for the park, so it's empty besides a house or two just past the barriers. We were there for maybe around 30 minutes before an older man walks by, gives us a "how's it going?" the way people do when you pass them on a walk, and turns around and walks back the other way. A little while later, he passes back again and notices us still sitting there, stops and says, "Are you girls alright? Are you waiting on a ride?" This did creep me out a bit, but I tend to be overly cautious, so I say, "Oh no, we're okay," which was completely true. I mean, I had driven there and I was still nowhere sober enough to drive, and we were just enjoying the nice weather before it got too cold. He responds by telling us to have a nice day and turns around. Sirius, through these interactions, just continued to play with his stick that he was chewing on. I mention these encounters just to solidify how absolutely strange the next one was. So, soon after, a man who seemed to be in his late 40s or early 50s starts to walk toward us. Instead of turning around like the other man had done, he starts to walk toward us, and Sirius absolutely loses it, barking and growling at this man and attempting to lunge at him. Despite the fact that he was only around 7 months old at this time, Sirius was a big dog, probably around 70 pounds at this point, and the man was very freaked out and continues past us, walking faster and keeping his distance. However, like I said earlier, there's nothing behind us besides an empty road and thick heavy woods. My friend and I continued to sit there talking until I was sure enough that he was gone. That was weird, right? I asked my friend around 30 minutes later. She agreed with me. I mean, where did he even go anyway? That was something I hadn't considered at that time, but looking around I couldn't think of anywhere that he could have been. Because we're high and stupid though, we come up with the brilliant idea to wait and see if he passes us again. And if he doesn't, we'd walk towards the road behind us to see if there were houses that he could have gone to. However, him living in one seemed pretty unlikely. I mean, he was dressed for hiking clearly with one of those backpacks specifically made for it. And if he lived so close, I didn't think that he'd be dressed up for a hike or anything. He doesn't pass us again, so we walk up the small hill and past the barricade. There's around 3 houses just past it, all pretty run down, and the second that we got to the first one, a man comes out on this porch with a gun and just stares at us. So, safe to say that the people who live there aren't a fan of people from the park on their property. I don't know if that's connected, but I think the only solution is that he went into the woods. I've never seen my dog act like that before, and I haven't seen him act like that since then. Every other time he acts like everyone he meets is known for life. I've always thought that dogs have better instincts than us, and I think that this just proved it for me. We're both pretty small girls, around 100 pounds and under 5'5", and it's scary to think what could have happened had my dog not been with us. And, I mean, we had no way to defend ourselves in such a secluded area. Like I said, this place was like forest beyond us, so really there was no reason for this guy to go there. My hunch is that he actually passed us, realized that our dog wasn't going to let him get near us, and ended up just continuing walking so that he didn't look too suspicious. It's either that or he was involved in something in that house. Which begs the question, what the heck is going on in that dilapidated house? I have had people stalk and follow me before, and because of that, and my true crime addiction, I've become supremely paranoid and a solid curtain twitcher. I, a 31-year-old female, resided in an upstairs room that was my first room to myself as a child. I had to leave a bad situation and therefore ended up back at my childhood home. For reference, when our house was built, we were told that the field to our left, with horses and a barn at the time, would one day soon be a development. It was 2000 when we were told that, and it wasn't until 2022 that roads started being formed and foundations laid. I'd already had someone follow me home before when I was young, but I was in a different bedroom next door. My parents put in a free library that's right below my window, and nighttime security lights that were very bright and turn on if you're within like 20 feet of the side of my house my room is on. I'll admit too that having an open field next to me so long made me accustomed to not closing the curtains when I changed, because there was never anyone to really watch or anything. But obviously now there is. For the past 2 weeks, the burglar lights next to the free library have been going off late at night as well. Because my one side of the curtain is open so I can use my vape, that was the only reason that I noticed at all. I didn't think too much of it at first. I mean, we lock all the doors and the windows every night, and I'm on the second floor anyway. I also always looked out to see if it was a car, someone walking their dog, or maybe a deer, only to see nothing. To add to that as well, they put in a ton of streetlights around this area, so visibility is pretty great. But it just kept happening for whatever reason. So, last night I did my usual and I saw the lights come on out of my peripherals. Giving full view out the window, I was going to bed, it was around 3 in the morning, turning the TV off, closing the window and curtains, turning the light out. Then, I ducked down, peering through the curtains to the sidewalk below. And I honestly thought that I was going to pass out when, after a few minutes, maybe 5, someone comes out from the side of my house, all silhouette, dressed completely in black. They kept their back to me until the light turned off, but I swear that I could still see them standing there, looking up like they could see me. I called the police, but while I was on the phone with the operator, I saw him run off. There really wasn't much that they could do, except say that they'd have a car drive around and look. My parents are asleep, and I know that I have to tell them tomorrow, but this honestly scares me a lot. If it hadn't have been happening for weeks and was a solo incident, I would probably be fine about it. But the fact that the light has been going off without me seeing activity, and what happened tonight, makes me think that this person has been watching me, and probably casing my house. Eventually I did tell my parents, and at first they brushed me off, claiming that I'd had a couple of drinks and it was late, so I probably just saw someone checking out the library. I then had another conversation about it with just my dad, who said that there had been reports the last couple of weeks of car break-ins, and since my car is parked on my side of the street, right outside of my window, maybe they were trying to break into it. I pointed out that if he was trying to get into my car, why was he pressed up against the house where he wasn't visible from my window? And why did he at no point go towards my car as well? I think that I freaked him out enough that we're going to potentially get a camera for that area. Given all of the development happening around us, I think it's smart, even without this incident. Anyway, here's hoping that this guy doesn't have plans to break into our home at some point. But if he does, then what do you guys think that I should do? I live with my partner and roommate, both of which are really into paranormal YouTube channels and shows. This is something that they bond over, and my roommate even has some tools that he has used, even in our own house that is over a century old. I, on the other hand, have an appreciation for it, but I'm not as into it as they are. I'm also more skeptical than they are, I suppose. Not to say that I don't believe in it, because I absolutely do, but I try to look at things from an objective point of view. With that being said, a few months ago, I am pretty sure I encountered a ghost cat. My partner and I have 3 cats. I work from home and have been dubbed the crazy cat lady, so the cats and I are all very attuned to one another. It began with me thinking that I see one of our cats out of the corner of my eye, but when I look, there's nothing there. I then began to see the cat figure walk around out of the corner of my eye. This is when I was introduced to the second ghost cat. One of them looks to be black or dark, while the other looks white. I've never seen both cats at the same time. We have a white cat with grey markings, a brown tabby, and a black and white tuxedo. Sometimes the ghost cats would do things my cats would normally do, so I chalked it up to being a muscle memory thing. Kind of like I'm used to them being there, so I feel like they're there. Until a few weeks ago when I was laying in bed, when I thought that I saw our white with grey spots cat dart across our room. Something that she would absolutely do, but when I sat up to talk to her, I didn't see her anywhere. I laid back down to see a white cat dart across the room the other way, up into the bedroom window, and I heard scratching or tapping at the window, something that my cat would not do. I slowly sat up thinking that it had to be my cat, only to see nothing. I tried telling myself that it's the muscle memory thing, but I couldn't get myself to believe it that time. I feel like it was a white ghost cat. Because of the amount of minor encounters, I decided to bring it up to my partner and roommate. My partner says that he thinks he's seen them too, but he's been too afraid to believe it because he feels like it's not a cat, but a bad entity trying to disguise itself as something innocent. My roommate thinks that I'm just used to the cats and I'm just overthinking it. This was super disheartening because I don't feel like I'm being overdramatic at all. I really believe that I've felt them and seen them. Now, I'm sharing this because I had a second encounter of one of them just a little bit ago. I think a black cat ghost touching me. I will sit at my desk to work, and oftentimes my cats will come and rub up on my legs, then I'll reach down to pet them. A few weeks ago when this happened, I reached down to feel, but there was no cat. I thought that it was the chair or my pant leg just tricking me, but it just happened again. And this time it felt sort of odd. Now I am fully convinced that there is a black ghost cat and a white ghost cat that live in my house. My cats have never acted strangely towards them, which is another reason that I don't believe that they're bad entities disguised. I also think that it could be one ghost cat, but I absolutely have seen both a black and white one, but never together, which, I don't know, maybe it is just one thing. Anyway, do you have any thoughts on this? Do you think that it is some sort of entity? Are ghost cats even a thing? Am I being dramatic? Is any of this valid? What do you think? I work night shifts, so staying up through the night is pretty normal on my days off. About 2ish in the morning, I always let my dogs out, and I let one run and keep the other on a leash because she loves to run after literally nothing. But my leash dog starts to snarl at the tree line that is about 30 yards out from me, and I notice something very large moving awkwardly into the tree line, moving into the woods. It was walking with a heavy rock side to side, moving very slowly. I own horses which are fenced in, and this was happening outside of their fenced-in area, so I know that it wasn't any of them. This thing, though, was looking as big to bigger than my horses, so I was really confused. We do have deer that like to nest or settle overnight inside the fence with their younglings, because the horses ward off some predators like coyotes and such. I walked to my house to grab the flashlight, and of course, I shined the light, but there was nothing. I never heard a single crack or snap or nothing while I saw it, and afterwards it was gone, which was weird because it was so huge and I would have expected to hear something. Anyway, my son said this afternoon that he saw something at 12:30 last night and said one of the horses was out, but then after checking all the horses were in, said that he must have seen the biggest deer that he's ever seen. Like a deer as big as a horse or even bigger. Now, he lives in a different house but further away on the property, about 3 times the distance I am. I scare deer away every night before I let the dogs out, so I don't have to chase them in the middle of the night through the woods. But this, whatever it was no deer. My wife believes it to be the spirit of one of our horses or whatever that we had to put down last week. In the past, we both have had our share of weird instances at that woodline, but this, for me, it definitely took the cake. Scary thing is that we're planning to build our future home right by that area. In 2016, I was a junior in high school. I didn't live far from school, but it was still about an hour's walk. I was in pretty good shape back then, I guess you could say, and didn't mind the walk when my older sibling couldn't pick me up due to work. My parents were both at work too, and I hated asking friends for rides because it just felt sort of bummy. Anyway, I started to walk home on a nice September day in Florida. About 5 minutes down the road, I got the feeling like someone was looking at me, and I turned around. And standing there, about 50 feet away, was a clown. This was back when the killer clown sightings were at an all-time high. It was late September, so I just assumed it was an early Halloween prank and shrugged it off. I turned back around and kept going. Another 5 minutes went by, and I couldn't shake the feeling a clown was following me. Again, I turned around, and he was about 30 to 40 feet away now. I was, needless to say, pretty nervous at this point. I turned back around when I heard a snap, and next to me, just inside the brush between subdivisions, was another clown. It was clear that this wasn't a prank anymore. Sensing that I was in danger, I started sprinting when the first one from behind me ran too, saying, "Grab him." The second clown chased after me too. I could clearly hear their footsteps behind me. I scanned the nearby houses and thankfully saw a police cruiser in a driveway. I got there and banged in the door until someone answered. The cop, seeing me shaken up, looked around and saw one of the two holding a decently sized hunting knife and told them to freeze. They both bolted, and after that I just ran, and I never heard anything about their capture or anything. To this day, clowns still unsettle me, and I cannot see a picture of any of them, whether it be a party clown or Pennywise or whatever, without thinking back to the time that I possibly almost died. I live in Sacramento, CA, where every summer we have the state fair. I was in my late teens, and my friend and I, both females, decided to check out the fair together. Parking was $10, and we were cheap, so we decided to park across the street. Well, a few streets deep in from across the street, because a lot of people had the same idea apparently. The fair was typical fair shenanigans, I guess, and we had a bit of fun. It was almost 10 p.m. and we decided to get out of there. The fair was lit up with lights and chaos, but the further that we got away from it, and the deeper that we got into the back streets across the street from the fair, the darker that it got and the less people you saw. My friend said, maybe I should get my mace out just in case, and we both laughed because both of our families at different points had given us mace to stay safe, but because we were young and dumb, we thought that we were invincible. My friend drove, so she was digging into her purse looking for her keys and slowed down while doing so, and I was a few feet ahead of her. At that moment, the fair fireworks started popping off in the sky, and I turned around to look for several seconds, and was walking backward while doing so. I turned around, and at that moment, as I was passing a creepy grey van, a man popped out behind it and grabbed me forcefully with both arms around me and started picking me up. Immediately, my friend ran up and sprayed mace in this guy's face, and she was able to do so because the mace happened to be attached to her keychain, which she just got out of her purse, mind you. She accidentally got some mace in my eyes, and man, did it hurt. but even though my eyes were burning, I vividly remember opening them up just enough to see that there was a cloud of mace floating in front of the guy's eyes as they were wide open, as if the mace almost didn't seem to affect him at all. Then he said calmly in a creepy voice, "I was just looking at her." We both screamed and he let me go, and we ran all the way to her car and got the heck out of Dodge. The weird thing though is that we didn't even go straight to the police that night because I wasn't sure if it was enough of an offense to do so, which I'm in my 40s now and know that it is, and my true crime-loving self now is pretty angry that I didn't go straight to the police then. I tried calling the non-emergency line the next day to report it, as I was suffering from red and swollen eyes from the mace, and I was being placed on hold and not being taken seriously. So eventually I just had to let it go and I moved on with my life. But about a week later, I heard in the news that there was a man wanted by police that lingered around the American river trails, which is where the fair is, who is apparently abducting women and taking them into his van, and yeah, you probably know the rest. I always wonder what would have happened if my friend wasn't there that day. Would I even be here? I've never been so thankful to be maced in the face like that. Ladies, even men, carry mace or some type of self-defense tool because it's an unpredictable and scary place out there sometimes, and you just never know what could happen. I'm 49 and male, and by the time that I'd reached my early 20s, I was of the opinion that there was nothing to life but what you could see or touch, nothing else. I guess the best way to start would be to tell you about a friend that I had in high school, Todd. I had met him through another guy that I had knew since like 6th grade. Todd was just a really good guy, always upbeat, loyal, just a really solid person. Looking back on it, he was probably the most genuine human being that I'd ever met, including up until now. We were around the same age though, and when I was around 19, it had been a while since I'd seen him, and our mutual friend calls me and tells me that Todd's house had apparently caught on fire, and he unfortunately had passed away trying to save his younger siblings during that fire. I cannot remember exactly, but I know that he made several trips in the house, saving at least 2 of his siblings, and went in again and the roof collapsed on him and another one just like 5 foot from the door, killing them both. It was just a horrible thing and I couldn't believe it. It was the first person, other than an elderly family member, that I knew who had passed away. Anyway, fast forward to 4 to 5 years from that. I'm in my car heading to a friend's house that lives in the same neighborhood where this happened. I'm maybe a mile or so away from where I'm headed, and about 100 yards or a little more ahead of me, walking towards me, there is a guy in jeans and a dark hoodie, hands in his pockets and his head down, looking at the ground as he is walking. For one, this is how I remember Todd too. Seems like I always remember him wearing jeans and a hoodie and maybe a jean jacket. But what really caught my eye was his gait. I think that Todd had a leg that was a little bit longer than the other one or something. He just had a sort of limp is what I'm getting at. I could have picked him out of a crowd just by his walk anywhere. It was really unique. So as we're getting closer to each other, I just feel something is not right or just off or something. I can't really put my finger on it, but as I get to him, I slow down and stop right next to him, and he stops as well. As we both come to a stop, he raises his head and looks right at me. We were about 10 feet apart, one of a 2-lane road, and he looks at me and it is him. And his face is glowing with the most brilliant green that you could imagine. We look at each other for maybe 4 or 5 seconds. It seemed like he had this sort of calm and peaceful look on his face, though. I think I was in shock, I guess. I don't know, but I let my foot off the brake and coasted probably 30 or 40 feet down the road. Stopped again, but I was too scared, I guess is the word, to look back, so I sat there for a few seconds and just pulled off and went to where I was going. Now, I've heard people talking about the colors in heaven being so much brighter or just more beautiful than colors here while explaining near-death experiences, and I think I get it now. I think that's where this green maybe was coming from. In any case, about a week before this happened, I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine, and I explained to him that I was an atheist. But now I truly believe that Todd was on that road that day to let me know that there was something else, more to life than just what we can normally see. It changed my whole outlook on life in a split second. And well, that's pretty much what happened. I have had experiences since then, but the rest are dark, and maybe I'll get to those another time. This one always sticks with me though, because, well, Todd was a good guy and I miss him. I am in university right now, but staying with my parents at their house for the summer. I was hanging out with one of my friends and we decided to go to a party. I met this guy around my age when we were talking and having fun, but it was nothing too serious or anything, or so I thought. We exchanged phone numbers, we hung out a couple of times, but he became incredibly clingy right from the start, so I decided to distance myself in the hope that he would get the hint and back off. Well, he didn't. When I stopped responding, he sent me over 100 messages, with each message becoming increasingly more aggressive as time went on. Keep in mind that it had been less than 2 weeks since we first met. I finally responded and told him that he needed to chill out. He appeared to calm down a bit after I responded, but he then asked for a phone call. I agreed and we talked for a while. He told me that he couldn't stop thinking about me, that I was the best thing that ever happened to him, etc. Just a bunch of stuff that is way too intense to say to someone that you barely know. I tried to let him down gently, reminding him that I was only home for the summer and wasn't looking for anything serious beyond a fling. But this only seemed to make him angrier. He started yelling at me, insulting me, calling me all sorts of names. Basically a complete 180 from what he had been saying mere minutes ago. Then, all of a sudden the phone went silent. After a pause, he said in a quiet voice, "You had better get ready because I'm coming over for you." And then he hung up the phone. This was obviously very frightening because he knew that my parents were out of town for the week and that I was staying at their house alone. However, he didn't know where my parents' house was because I was always the one driving, and he didn't know my friend either, so I thought that he had no way of figuring it out, since, again, I'm normally living at school in another state. Regardless, I locked all the doors and shut the blinds just in case. After a while, though, maybe an hour or so, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I looked at my phone and I saw a notification on my lock screen. It was from the Ring app, indicating that there had been movement on my parents' camera, and it was him. If you watch the video, you can clearly see something in his hand as well. When he notices the camera, however, he left. I immediately blocked him on everything and I reported the incident. I have no idea what he planned to do once he got here. It was terrifying, though, to realize that he had come over when I was asleep and defenseless and completely unaware of his presence. As I would later find out, he was able to get my address from my phone number. Apparently, he Googled it and it returned my dad's name as the owner of the phone number, along with my parents' address. Since I'm on my parents' phone plan, I guess it shows up that I still live here. This revelation was horrifying as I never knew that my phone number could reveal my home address like that. I'm still extremely upset that this kind of private information is on the internet for pretty much anyone to find, as it's incredibly dangerous that websites would just give this away to anyone. So please, learn from my mistakes and do not give anyone your phone number unless you trust them. I found out that you can get a free Google Voice number to text and call people, and that number cannot be traced back to you so easily. My advice is to use a disposable number for anyone you're talking to that you meet informally or online. I really still can't sleep very well at night, and hopefully this never happens to anyone else. It was September in central Idaho. Autumn had come to the mountains, and with it bow hunters looking for mountain goats. My cousin Vern is an avid hunter. He's been all over North America hunting various game. Bears in Alaska, wild dogs in Texas, bighorn sheep in Wyoming. But his favorite hunting area was the Lemhi mountain range in central Idaho. Our extended family has been hunting in those mountains for generations. We know every river bottom and mountain peak like many people know their own neighborhoods. Mountain goats are a fascinating animal to hunt. They live well above the tree line in rocky environments. They are sure-footed and can climb near vertical slopes. Hunting these animals requires one to venture into these dangerous areas too, and you have to be mindful as you pursue an animal like that. One wrong step on a rocky slope or one loose rock could mean that you're not going home ever again. Vern was an expert mountain hunter. It's something that I think that he was born to do. Now Vern decided to hunt in the Hayden River area. It's a familiar spot to most locals, and the area is home to plenty of mountain goats. The first mile of Vern's hike was uneventful as he climbed up the canyon. The air was crisp, and his breath formed in great plumes as he progressed. The sun was just peeking over the mountains when Vern came to a small deer trail. He decided that it might be a nice shortcut from his usual route and took it. A few hundred feet up the trail, he saw something odd pop out from behind a tree, though. It was a man. He was dressed in a light denim coat and jeans and was carrying a small backpack. My cousin stopped for a second to get his bearings, unsure of where this guy came from. The man waved at him with both arms. One of them was holding an older-style hunting bow, and acknowledging him, Vern waved back. Although the man looked to be physically fine, it was clear that he was emotionally distressed. He yelled out something my cousin couldn't quite hear and waved his arm, indicating that my cousin should follow him. Vern didn't get any bad vibes from this guy and could tell that he was genuinely in need of some help. He began to make his way up the canyon following this mystery man. Vern could never gain any ground on this guy, though. He was always just far enough away that he couldn't really talk to him. Periodically, the man would stop, turn towards him to make sure Vern was still following him. Every time that he looked back, Vern could see the worry in his face. My cousin did his best to remain calm and keep a smile on his face, unsure who or what he was being led to. It was peculiar, Vern thought as he hiked. He hadn't seen any other vehicles on his drive up to the trailhead. Perhaps he came in from another ridge or something? What could he possibly be leading him to, though? He figured one of his hunting party had been hurt and needed help. Of course, he wouldn't have had to speculate if the man would just stop and talk to him for 5 minutes. Vern, though, lost sight of the guy just past a turn in the trail. The trail opened up into an incredibly steep, rocky talus slope. He looked in every direction and he couldn't locate the man when he heard a whistle. Looking up, he saw the guy about 500 feet up the rocky slope waving at him. There was just no possible way that he could have gotten up that far in just the short time that Vern lost sight of him. Mind you, he still didn't feel any fear or wariness about the weird situation. The man was waving more frantically now, practically begging Vern to follow him up the slope. With a sigh and a grunt, he started up the rocks. It was slow going. Every other step caused a mini rock slide and could cause him to continually lose his footing. Huffing and puffing on the cool thin air, my cousin eventually made it to a small landing. It had taken him almost 45 minutes to get to that spot where he saw the man from below. There was no earthly way that anyone could have done that scramble up that hill any faster. Totally exhausted though and out of breath, Vern sat down on the stone landing. He looked around and couldn't see the man anywhere at this point. As he scanned his surroundings, he saw something odd poking out of the boulder about 20 feet away from him. Walking over to it, he found a weathered boot. 2 boots, actually. Inside of those boots, and under the boulder as well were bones. Vern looked around once again for the man, but he never did see him again. Weirdly enough, instead of feeling eerie or unnerving, Vern felt a sense of relief wash over him. He speculates that these emotions were not his own. What he felt seemed to have come from all around him. He marked the spot with his GPS and he decided to make his way down and call the authorities. The county sheriff's office responded and he led them up the canyon to the body. It took 4 grown men to push the boulder out of the way, and when they did, they found the skeletonized remains of a man. On the body, they found hunting equipment and some personal effects. From a credit card in the wallet, they were able to identify the man. He was a bow hunter that had gone missing almost exactly 53 years beforehand. Vern never wanted to be identified to the public or the missing hunter's family. He didn't want any recognition for something like that. To him, it was just one of those bizarre mountain stories that you hear from time to time. He was happy that the family got closure, even if it was half a century later. The only thing that bothered him, though, was the man leading him up the canyon and with his strange and sudden disappearance like that. He had mentioned the waving man to the sheriff, but was brushed off. When news reports came out announcing the discovery, several photos of the man were published, and Vern was absolutely shocked when he saw them. In the photos was the man that he had seen leading him up the mountain to the body. It finally made sense to him, the man's distressful look, the constant checking if Vern was following him, the sense of relief that he felt when the body was discovered. That man was desperate to get home, and through Vern, he was able to be reunited with his family. Back some 20 years ago, I had a guy that I knew from college that was getting into real estate and asked me to show some homes for some experience, and we were actually looking. I get to the house but don't see his car, and it is pouring rain. I wait in my car for a few, and maybe about 5 minutes later, the porch light turned on. I figured that he must have drove a different vehicle and parked along the road, so I got out and went to the door, but when I got there, it was locked. I knocked, but there was no answer, and I was absolutely soaked at this point. Just as I started back to my car, my friend pulled in. He asked why I was waiting in the rain like that, and I told him what happened. Halfway through my explanation, the porch light goes back off. We approach the door, knock, and again there's no answer. He accessed the key in the agent box, and we go in. We check the switch inside the front, and it is the one for the porch light, and once it was back on, we looked for a sensor, but there was none. First off, there's creepy vibes and no lights on. As we work through from front to back, we turn on the lights and turn them back off again on the way to the front. The upstairs is accessed in the front of the home, so when we go up, all the downstairs lights are off except for the front room. We go up, start looking at the rooms, and that was when a knocking starts. 3 at first, that makes us both give the "what the heck, did you just hear that?" look to each other. Then after a bit, 3 more, but much louder this time. We started to nope out of there, and as we got the lights out and headed back downstairs, we heard 3 poundings from the hallway at the top of the stairs, now dark but in clear sight. At this, we head for the door quickly, but just as we're getting the key ready for the box, we notice the light in the very backside room is now on again. My friend asked if I would go with him to shut it off, and I convinced him in the end to just leave it on. It seemed very sus, in fact, almost like a trap, I felt, and as a grown man, I was feeling a fear that, honestly, I am very unaccustomed to. As we left, though, the porch light came back on again. We never did go back, but we have driven by several times just to look at that house. So before I begin, I would just like to say that this has been reported to local police with as much detail as possible. So, I've been searching for several hours on who to reach out to and how to put this into words, something that I went through this evening. I came across this place and I decided that this is something that I should share. So, tonight my girlfriend, 22-year-old female, and I, 23-year-old female, were heading home from a picnic at a local park. As we drove away from the park and approached the stop sign, I noticed that there was a car parked at the stop sign. I remember thinking to myself that it seemed a bit odd. We pulled up to the car and we stopped, and when I looked over I saw a man, his wrists tied together, a terrifying expression on his face as if he was screaming or crying for help. I instantly froze and asked my girlfriend if she had seen what I did. As we had pulled just forward from the car, she asked what I saw, turned around, and he was still there, wrists together on his steering wheel, staring and making eye contact with her. We both panicked, asking, do we call 911? Do we circle back around? Trying to make sense of what we just saw. And I think it hit us both at the same time when we realized that it was most likely a tactic to lure us closer to his car. I know that I've personally read multiple stories of possible trafficking tactics happening in my county. I'm lucky to have seen these, and I knew to get away as soon as I could. Sure enough, too, when we drove off, he followed us for about half a mile until we got to a busier road and we finally lost him. I've been in a state of fear and confusion and panic ever since this. It may seem like an overreaction, but I have, 1, never been in a fearful situation such as this, and 2, never seen someone tied up before in possible danger before recognizing the signs. I guess that I'm looking for reassurance, wondering if anyone out there had been in the same or similar situation as this and what they did. I'm really shaken up by this, and truly I'm a bit baffled that we live in a world where things like this can happen. Stay safe, everyone. When I was 17, I was asked to babysit for a family friend. She had 4 kids, ages 11 to 4. They lived in a really old house, and the 3 girls shared a room together as well. I babysat really late at night because the mum's work shift was like 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., so I was mainly there to put the kids to sleep and then wait for their mum to come home. Their house always made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. It was old and it made a lot of noises. After I put the kids to sleep one night, I went back to the living room, sat on the couch, and I was just scrolling on my phone. Their dog started barking towards the back of the kitchen. I was confused at what they were barking at, so I thought that maybe the wind outside was spooking them or something. It was really windy that night. They stopped barking, but then started to run back and forth down the hallway between the living room and the kids' rooms. I was trying to calm them down because I didn't want them to wake up the kids. They finally settled down, but then I heard the girls scream. The 3 girls share a room, and they came running out crying, saying, "The man with red eyes and no arms is back in the closet." The oldest said he was staring at us again. I was also scared now. So I told the girls to stay in the living room until their mum came home. I realized their little brother, 4-year-old, was still sleeping in his room next to the girls' room. I couldn't just leave him by himself, so I told myself that I wasn't scared and I went to get him so that he could be in the living room with all of us. As I was getting him, their dog started running back and forth again, and I could hear the girls say, "He's here, he's here." I got their brother and ran back to the living room, but didn't see anyone except the girls crying. That night, they all fell asleep with the lights on in the living room. The mum was upset at me for not making them sleep in their rooms, so she never asked me to babysit again. To be honest, I was pretty happy about that, but I still shudder when I think about that night. What was that all about? Why did the dogs go nuts like that? Were the kids actually seeing something? Why couldn't I see it? I still have a lot of questions to this day. So I was standing out with my older brother, both of us smoking cigarettes outside of my parents' porch. My family and I grew up in a very superstitious part of the American Southwest. I guess you could say in a part of America where there is a very strong fear of skinwalkers. I know, another skinwalker story, right? But what I witnessed alongside of my brother, honestly, it felt chillingly real. A few years before this incident, my older brother and I encountered something in our parents' backyard, so we've always been a bit on edge at night around our neighborhood, still am to this day. That, and we grew up in a culture that discourages people from wandering around at night without some sort of cultural blessing. But we were a few years older, smoking our cigarettes, catching up, because my brother was attending college in the city, and I was finishing up my junior year in high school. I was rambling on about something when I saw my brother's startled look out at our neighbor's yard. I looked over at what he was staring at and found myself looking at a shadow figure standing outside of our neighbor's house. It's difficult to describe this shadow, as its figure was basically blacker than the night outside the dim glow of the streetlights, having an almost shadow radiance, if that makes any sense. But whatever it was standing on the side of our neighbor's house, and while I couldn't see its face, I just knew that it was staring at our neighbor's draped windows. My brother and I looked at each other with disbelief. I mean, we'd both heard the stories about skinwalkers roaming around at night. We both witnessed that sort of thing years ago, but it was only a glimpse followed by hearing the most otherworldly, horrifying howl that sounded both sort of human and animal. But this was different. It was like seeing something that we were never meant to see, something even more sinister than before. We said nothing to each other, turning our gaze back towards the figure, which was still staring at the neighbor's window. After what seemed like a long moment, the figure started to slowly turn and walk to our neighbor's backyard. But the way that it moved was a surreal sight. It looked to be both sort of moving slow and fast at the same time, like jogging in place, except it was gliding along. Then it moved towards a group of neighborhood dogs, and I knew that these were neighborhood dogs because I recognized almost every one of them under the dim tangerine backyard light, but they weren't scared by the shadow figure. In fact, they almost looked to be welcoming it. The dogs formed a crowd around the figure, which stopped, and I swear to this day, morphed down onto all fours, sprang a back tail, and disappeared into the night with a group of neighborhood dogs following. I looked at my brother and asked, "What did you put into those cigarettes?" We both nervously chuckled, but we knew what we saw, and we hurried back inside, making sure that we took our cigarette butts with us. Inside, our dad and youngest brother were asleep, but our mum was still up. We told our mother what had happened, and she instructed us to go outside to get some wood to burn. She smeared ash on our foreheads, and we ventured outside to gather some firewood. While walking towards the wood pile, we noticed that our streetlight, which was on when we were heading back inside after stamping out our cigarettes, was now out. The only streetlight out in the entire neighborhood. We saw it as a sign of something being around, and we hurried to gather the wood. Right when we were about to head inside, we could smell it, the strong, putrid scent of a dead animal. We knew right there and then that we were in the middle of those stories that we'd heard about skinwalkers. We didn't stop to take a look around, and instead we just made haste back to our house, and we instantly built a fire. We told our mum what we had smelt outside, and she marched outside with a fresh tin of ash to confront whatever was out there. She yelled in English and her native language to leave us alone, we never did anything to you, and commanded it for it to leave by the traditional ways and the way of Jesus Christ. She sprinkled ash outside our front and back porch, and anchored a bow and arrow above the door leading out towards the back porch. We slept that night without any more incidences, but months later, when I moved to a city to live with my older brother and work for the summer, I get a call from my mum. She told me that the neighbor who lived in the house that the shadow figure was outside of apparently had died of cancer. I don't know if that is just coincidence or not, but whatever we saw that night, it still gives me chills when I think about it to this day. This happened about a year ago now. I was living in Barrio Logan in San Diego at the time. My place was the side entrance of a duplex, and the house was right next to a park. One night at around 11 p.m., I was playing Call of Duty. I had my front door open and the screen door locked to help cool the house down. As I was playing with my friends, I heard screaming outside, but thought that it was just my game. But I then heard it again, followed by a female scream. My friends over my headset pointed it out and asked me what was going on in my house. I replied to them that I thought that that was my game, and nothing is happening in my home. I got up though and checked outside. Right across the street there was a man shoving a woman around the street and hit her while she was screaming. She pulls out her phone and he grabbed it and threw it across the road at my fence. He never saw me though. He then runs around the corner and she goes the opposite way. I run out and catch her around the corner and I'm trying to help her out. She kept walking and blankly stared at me over her shoulder. I asked her if she had somewhere to go, and she didn't reply. I asked if she needed help, and with that she replied with "go away" in a shaky voice. I was going to turn back to my house when the man whips around the corner and starts screaming at me. He starts telling me that I'm getting into something that I don't need to be in. I got a really weird feeling from that guy. He then puts his hand under his shirt and asks if I'm trying to get shot. I back off and said, "Hey, look, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to get into someone's business. I just saw her crying and asked if she was okay, but I'll let you handle it." I walk past him to go back home, and he starts walking behind me. I started sprinting and sprinted all the way around the block, took the back entrance to the alley, and went inside. I called the police, and 5 minutes later, 5 squad cars zoomed by my home. I'm still not sure if they actually caught the guy or not. So I recently got a job at my local liquor store. My job is 5 minutes away from my place, and I honestly love this job because it's really chill, and since I'm a local, I already know many of the customers that come in on a regular basis. This job helped me get back into contact with a lot of people that I haven't seen for a few years as well. One day, an old friend, his name is Steve, from high school, walks in and he remembers me. We hadn't seen each other for a few years, so we had a nice talk and made plans to hang out with a mutual friend sometime in the near future. I remember that we talked about how our mutual friend would do this thing where he would tell these stories that sounded super fake and made up. For example, he told both of us a story about how he supposedly got shot in the leg, but the story was different every time. Anyway, I tell Steve that our mutual friend is like Paul Bunyan with all his tall tales. Steve laughs and says, "Yeah, totally bro, he is Paul Bunyan." I remember that he had bought some beatboxes, which are this alcoholic beverage that's pretty popular in my store. I remember the exact flavor that he had and everything, and I remember clearly asking him if those things were any good, and Steve tells me, "Yeah, they mess you up." About a week later, I come into work and I see my coworker, Diane. She is acting strange in a way where I suspect that she's going through something tough in her life. She asks me if I remember Steve, and I say yes, of course. She informs me that apparently he had passed away. I asked if it was an overdose, and she told me that it wasn't, but also said that she felt like it was not her place to tell me the real cause of the death. Well, I think it over, and I decide the next time that I see Diane, I would explain to her that I have known Steve since high school, and he's not just some local customer that I met at work. A few days pass, and I see Diane at shift again. Mind you, I work very late, from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. usually. And before I get a chance to talk to her, the manager comes in and Diane goes out to the front to talk to her. I let them have their girl talk for a few minutes. Then I go outside to let the manager know that I need to quickly use the restroom. Well, when I go outside, I overhear Diane say something along the lines of, yeah, it's messed up that they would make the wife pay money to have the brains all over the place cleaned up. The manager replied, oh yeah, she's going to most likely be getting a bill for that cleanup. When I heard this, I knew. I went back inside the store and just felt so sad for my friend Steve. I just stared into space for a few minutes and went back outside to find Diane and the manager kind of staring at me as if they knew that I'd heard what she had said and were waiting for me to mention it. I chose not to, and I waited until I was alone with Diane to discuss the issue. I explained to her that me and Steve, we were high school friends, and she opened up to me after that. Turns out that Diane had an ex who did the same thing a few years back. She really opened up to me about what was going on after this. She told me that Steve had just had a newborn 2 days before the incident, and another boy who was about 4. Steve's longtime partner had been with him for like 8 years straight without any major hitches. Diane tells me that she has known both Steve and his girlfriend since the first grade. They all grew up together apparently. She tells me that she was driving the car with Steve's girlfriend in the back seat, and the widow was finally able to get some sleep in the back seat as Diane was driving. And well, then the 4-year-old decides to ask where Dad is and why he can't see him anymore. They told the kid that he was with God now. It's all just so horribly sad because the poor child thinks that God kidnapped his dad and now he's mad at God apparently. But this is where things get a bit strange. You see, that night I went to restock beverages in the back. It was around 1 a.m. and I suddenly had the sensation that I wasn't alone, and it actually felt as if I was with someone that I knew, but I couldn't see them. I had a feeling that my buddy might try to send me a message. I know that's weird, but I thought to myself that if I see anything, I would try my best not to be scared and pass on whatever message that I receive if possible. Well, I grabbed the exact same beverage that I sold him last time that I saw him and put it onto a shelf. I bent over to pick up something else, and the drink that I had just put on the shelf got smacked really loudly to the ground, as if someone was frustrated or angry and hit it. This made me very uncomfortable, obviously, and I ended up calling some friends to come and chill with me for the rest of my shift. I even took a few shots of whiskey to calm myself down. Later that night, after work, I tell my mum what happened. She explains to me that he might be frustrated and angry at his own sad decisions and the fact that it was too late to change it. My mother is a Buddhist, so she gives me a Buddhist prayer to play at work to bring positive energy. I play the prayer at work the next day, and she also comes to accompany me for part of my shift. But during the prayer, a foam cup also got thrown by nothing, and my mum and I both saw it this time. However, this time it felt like a much more, like peaceful action without anger behind it. Again, I know that's weird to say, but that's just how I interpreted it. Almost as if he was saying that he heard the prayer. My mum told me that she felt that this was him trying to communicate. In my opinion, the prayer did what it was supposed to do, and I feel as if he left peacefully, and the foam cup being lightly tossed was his way of saying, "Hey man, I'm sorry I scared you the other day. It's time for me to go." I miss my buddy, and I hope anyone who hears this that is going through tough times in life gets through it and chooses to live on. Things like this are never the right path, and it will only lead to more pain for everyone involved. I still think about all of this a lot, and to be honest, I can't really make any sense of it, other than that something paranormal happened. For some context, I'm in my mid-20s, working in marketing and sales, have a girlfriend, we have a son and a baby daughter on the way. I don't smoke, don't drink, don't take any pills, I don't have any diagnosed mental illness or disorders or anything. I was always very healthy and a happy kid with a decent childhood, and even nowadays I'm also a happy person. I work hard, but I still believe that I'm privileged in some ways. I'd like to get this off my chest as well and try and understand if others have also had this happen to them. That's why I'm sharing this. So, the earliest memory that I have is from when I was possibly maybe 3 or 4 years old. The best way to describe what I was seeing from my point of view was almost like I was a robot being turned on for the first time. Everything was dark. I remember knowing that I was conscious, but for a good 5 to 10 seconds I couldn't see anything. That's when I finally could see something, but for some reason, everything was in shades of black and white. My eyes adjusted to the light, and I found myself seated in what I believe was my parents' kitchen, fixated on a white tumble dryer as the clothes inside spun around. I couldn't move, and it was total silence. I remember feeling helpless. It was such a weird feeling to describe, but suddenly there was total darkness again, but my consciousness remained intact. It was as if I had just discovered my own existence, and I was feeling helpless and kind of afraid because I didn't want to be in total darkness forever. I really wasn't sure what was going on. The darkness lingered for what seemed like forever. I finally regained my vision. I woke up in a completely black world. Around me were some sort of white towering structures that resembled pillars, with figures made of white smoke perched on top. I couldn't make out any features except for their general presence. I would guess that there were a dozen of them, staring at me. The landscape stretched into what seemed like a labyrinth, and as I tried to make sense of it all, the ground started shaking. I turn around as fast as I can, and a colossal, perfectly round white sphere is coming my way. This was all happening so fast that I wasn't really sure of what to do, so I just panicked and started running around. Again, the feeling of helplessness and fear makes me sweat just thinking about it. But I ran as fast as I could, but the ball was just too fast. It crashed into me, and my memory is crystal clear of me being totally crushed by this thing. Thankfully, there was no pain, only a paralyzing fear. I remember feeling the presence of the white smoke figures around me. Strangely, I felt safe when I sensed them arrive near me. I didn't sense malevolence or that they were going to hurt me or anything. After getting crushed, darkness again. This time, though, it was as if my consciousness had disappeared too. I don't remember a single thing, until my 5th birthday, that is. Then, I have absolutely normal childhood memories. Birthdays, playing with toys, my siblings, exploring nature, first day of school, etc. For years and years, I didn't remember any of this. It wasn't until I was maybe 15 years old that I remember this first memory when I was alone at home, playing some video games. As the memories of that happening rushed back, I literally started shaking in fear, and the feeling was so vivid that I had my first and thankfully only panic attack. I just laid on my bed, tears started pouring down my face, and I couldn't catch my breath. I eventually calmed down by doing some breathing exercises and praying, which was weird for me because I'm not a religious person by any means, but yeah, that's what I did. Once I calmed down, I was still depressed for a few weeks after this experience, and just didn't understand what had happened and where this weird memory came from. I eventually just decided to attribute it to kids seeing and experiencing weird stuff. But it wasn't real, right? Anyway, that's my weird first memory and story. I've never shared it with anyone, and once in a while, especially if I'm quiet, reading or doing something with no noise around me, the memory always comes back and I can relive that stuff in my head very vividly. What I mean is that it definitely feels more like a memory and less like something that I've made up. Luckily, I've learned to suppress it, but every once in a while, I remember getting crushed by a giant white sphere while something watched on. It's 4 a.m. and as I'm sharing this, I'm trying to shake off the nerves, but it's difficult. I had just fallen asleep after a night out at the bar celebrating my partner's friend's birthday. I woke up very suddenly to what I thought was the sound of my door trying to open. I thought that I was crazy, but decided to send my drunk boyfriend to look through the peephole. And he told me that there was a man standing right outside of our door. At the same time, however, there was a woman taking a dog out to potty, so being the drunk that he was, my boyfriend couldn't tell if these two were together or not. The situation just didn't sit right with me though, so I looked through the peephole myself, but when I did, the man was gone. I took watch for about 5 minutes, after which I heard some glass or ceramic break. Eventually, I saw the man walking back in front of my door and around to the other side of the building. We have a corner apartment, so I peeped through the blinds on the living room window side to try and see him. I saw the man approaching a car right in front of my window. I got scared and I stopped looking. I checked again, but he was gone. I then went to look through the bedroom blinds and saw him being handcuffed by a sheriff. We were able to catch the security guard's attention through our bedroom window, and he told us that he'd been suspicious of and following the man for a while now. I really wish that my dog was here. He's boarding because of our night out. He would have scared that guy away with his barks, and maybe I wouldn't be such a nervous wreck. My husband and I moved into this house almost 3 years ago now, and in that time there have been only 2 very strange occurrences, and weirdly enough, I didn't connect the 2 until just now. Now I'm wondering, is there something here? Is there a name for this thing? Well, the first incident happened around 2.5 years ago, I believe. It was shortly after we moved in, I remember that much. I actually shared this somewhere else on the internet, but the way that our house is laid out, it's a semi-open concept where you have to come down in a hallway from a front area in the kitchen or living room area, which occupies the same space, but there's a wall that partially obscures one side of the living room if you're in the kitchen. Now, I was cooking dinner and my dog was lying at my feet, hoping for me to drop some food, I suppose. My husband came down the hallway and went around the corner into the living room without saying a word, and my dog got up and followed him into the living room. I started talking about some work gossip while I cooked, basically droning on for a bit with no response from my husband for several minutes. When I put the food into the oven to cook, I went into the living room planning to sit down with him and wait. Except when I stepped around the wall, he wasn't there anymore. Our dog was on the couch alone. A second later, I heard the basement door open, and it's a noisy door, so there's no way that he could have got up and went down while I was talking to him. Also, it would have been impossible for me to not see him go, since he would have had to have walked back through the kitchen to go literally anywhere else in the house. But he comes into the living room, and I immediately asked if he had been here a minute ago. He looked genuinely confused and said that he had been playing video games in the basement for over an hour at this point. It was creepy and unsettling, but we both just kind of shrugged it off and embraced the spooky story as one to tell my friends who came over to visit. But then, the second thing happened. This was maybe 6 months ago, so about 2 years since the first. I tend to just sort of startle awake from dreams and then be fully awake. It's always been a thing that I do. And this one night I jolted awake and it was still dark out but early morning. We have 2 dogs now and they sleep in the corner of our bedroom. My back was to them and I heard my husband's voice clear as day, unmistakable, in a very quiet whisper praising the dogs, saying things like, "You're such good boys and I love you so much." This is 100% in character for him, mind you, so I didn't think too much of it. I just rolled over towards the sound, about to tell him that I thought that he was sweet. But when I rolled over, he wasn't there at all. He wasn't in the bedroom at all. It was just me and the dogs. In the dark, I couldn't tell if the dogs were awake, but they were lying down calmly. But the fact that this thing keeps impersonating my husband freaks me out. What could it be? It doesn't scare the dogs, and it has never done anything other than just be there. Should I be worried? What should I do? I, a 25-year-old female, have been working at this hospital for a year. I was promoted in March due to the previous night shift supervisor wanting a better job for himself, so I decided, with what I already know about the hospital, I would step up for my co-workers to be their supervisor. I trust myself and only myself with this hospital, but this hospital is horrifying. The amount of things that I've heard, what I've seen, and what it's capable of is insane. So, we have 3 major buildings, and I'll continue by numbering them. Number 1, our first major building, was a morgue on the ground floor, and we use that morgue because we have to. It's just a part of our job. Thankfully, that part of our job has changed drastically, so we do not need to be with the mortician during a pickup, if that makes sense. Originally, we would have to be in the morgue with the mortician to see if any items were left on the deceased. We do not need to do that anymore, and instead what we can do now is, if something makes us uncomfortable, we can stay in the hallway outside of the morgue. We have to let our SOC operator know first, however, and after the deceased has been covered and the mortician is ready, we go back inside the morgue to lock the door. To get the deceased, they need to have the cold room door in the morgue unlocked, and after they find the deceased, we lock the door again. We have to make sure every time that it's locked, and it is our first priority every time. So, that's the first building. Number 2, our next building, is connected to the first building and was made in 2018. I'll be brief about this because we have issues going on at that site right now, but this building is also incredibly haunted. We have CCU and ICU on 2 different floors. Because my mum works here, I also know a variety of different nursing staff and transporters, CNAs, things like that. We patrol this building as well to make sure that nobody is lost and that our clients feel safe. However, due to CCU and ICU, the hallway lights flicker. One time a nurse had me investigate an odd sound that we were hearing, and when I heard it, it was laughter. It sounded like a child, so I reported it, and my co-supervisor at the time told me just to leave the area and try not to think about the incident. Just to make a general activity log and tell our bosses that I investigated. The third is the building that is across the street. I do not go here at all, I refuse to in fact. In this building, I have had my own experiences of being dragged into rooms by an unseen force, choked, and I was also kicked a couple of times from an unseen force. We have tours and checkpoints that we scan, and whenever we do interior patrols, we always feel like someone is watching us non-stop and is following us. I have asked my own weekend officers regarding this building, and they say the same thing as me. They see shadows, they get dragged into rooms. One time, a badge reader was showing green with no one scanning their badge and the building was locked up. When I was doing a regular shift, I saw a figure in white walking up the stairs, and my ex-boyfriend heard someone walking up the steps as I saw someone too. Then, a couple of weeks later, he saw something that terrified him, and I only heard the sounds. My ex-boyfriend was a very competent guard. He was really experienced, and pretty much nothing scared him. But that night, what we were having followed us scared him to his core. We thought that it was a human because it walked into one of the 3 auditoriums that we have, and when we followed it inside, it just disappeared. The next thing that we heard is something that I guess you could describe as scratching and nails being dragged across the walls. These walls were tall, and that's all that we could hear in the auditorium, nails being dragged deeply. We both decided that that was enough, and we just went outside. I began to vape to ground myself because I was just so scared and I was shaking so much. If anyone has any questions, then please feel free to ask. Yes, I still work at this site and I return to work tomorrow, in fact, at night at 11 p.m. So, wish me luck. In my late teens and early 20s, my friend and I were out cruising. It was early to mid-fall in Southern California, so not too cold to have the windows open to smoke. I heard a man yelling at someone and I started to look around. We saw a young woman walking down the street, hugging her arms to herself. While it wasn't too cold, it was too cold for bare feet and a spaghetti strap top. We pulled the car, two-door, to the side and asked if she needed a ride. She said yes, and so I opened the door to pull up the seat back and let her crawl in. But as she turned toward me, she had a huge butcher knife in her hand. I slammed the door shut and we took off. And after that, I never offered a ride to anyone ever again. We did call the cops and let them know so that they could check it out. So I'm a 25-year-old female, and this strange thing happened to me just this afternoon. I often take nice and relaxing strolls through the forest on Sundays together with my dad, which is, I guess, some kind of tradition since my childhood, and today was no exception. Sometimes my uncle joins us on those strolls, and today he did so too. So, we walked down our usual paths, and at a split of the path, we met some old man that my dad and uncle obviously knew. The man was walking the opposite direction back towards the village. They did some small talk and then we headed further along the path through the forest, my dad and uncle being a bit ahead of me and talking to each other while I took some photos of the beautiful nature around us. And in the process of walking a bit slower than them and stopping a few times, there were a few times that I was a good distance behind them, which at that point I didn't realize that it could have been dangerous. At some point on the path we turned to head back home, and as we walked a bit, I stopped for a moment to take a picture of the trees next to the path. Then, after taking the picture, I, for some reason, looked a bit left and was absolutely shocked the moment that I turned my head, because farther in the forest, leaned against one of the trees, stood that old man that we had met before, absolutely still, just staring intensely back at me without any movement and without saying a word. After the initial shock, I decided to just look away and keep on walking, not daring to look behind us most of the way back. I didn't tell my father or uncle about it, but it was just such a weird experience. What scares me the most about it, though, is that I don't have any real explanation as to why that man had been following us, and even more why he was doing so not on the path but just within the forest. And if he didn't have anything creepy in mind, why he didn't say anything, but just stared at me like that. To be honest, I'm just so glad that I wasn't walking alone that day. I work at a hospital, and I went to the gym in the basement on Saturday evening, around 6 p.m. That space is really creepy, and it was extra creepy that day when the hospital was more empty than usual. I was feeling a weird way by the time that I got down there, so when I got into the extra creepy locker room, I put on a sound cleanse. I just learned about these. I felt like it would counter the drab surroundings and the flickering light and get rid of whatever it was that I could tell was so heavy and dark down there. It was really noticeable that something did not like this too. It felt like I was much more uneasy using the gym than I ever had been before. I kept the cleanse on the whole time and I still was anxious as heck. And in the end, I went home and I went to a movie that night. Sunday all day was good, maybe some ominous overtones. As it got later and stormed and was darker in the evening, it felt like whatever set up shop in the basement was now attached to me. By the time that I went to sleep, it was heavy, low energy that was just a menace to my mental state. And then when I was awoken at around 12:30, I was woken up by something speaking a curse word in a demonic-sounding alien language directly at my forehead. Obviously, I completely freaked out, and the weirdest feeling was that it felt like a bubble that something blew into my head popped. It struck me as some kind of curse word, I guess, but I also immediately thought that it had to do with the tourmaline that I wear on my neck. I've been wearing it to sleep now for a couple of weeks, but after this, I was awake for hours and put back on some of the cleanse sounds that I had found. I ate and stayed out of my bed for 30 minutes and was able to eventually go back to sleep. Now though, I just get this feeling that something wants to set up shop in my apartment. I broke a plate this morning, and when I was down in that gym, I got the weirdest headache too. These all may be unrelated, but still, I'm really on edge and I just don't know what to do. I was a sophomore in high school when this happened. It was during May, and I stayed after school with half of my grade due to an award show that was going on. It was conducted by the literature department and our principal. Me and my group actually won the Best Message Award for our short film too. Anyways, after the award show was over, me and my friend went back to our classroom to change into more comfortable clothes and to spend some more time together while we waited for our parents to come and pick us up. Only 5 of us were in that classroom at that time. As the time went by, 3 of my friends left with their parents. It was only me and my best friend in the classroom at this point. 30 minutes later, her dad called her to say that they were waiting for her on the school's yard. By the way, our classroom is on the 3rd and highest floor. Together, we walked down the stairs to the ground floor though. She asked me if I wanted to come outside with her and maybe wait in the waiting area next to the security. To this day too, I really curse myself for not saying yes to that. Instead, I said no and decided to wait in the waiting area inside our building. I could have went to my principal's office and waited with her since she liked spending time with me anyway and talking to me. If you couldn't tell, I was a bit of a nerd and one of the top people in my grade. In my school, there were 5 couches in the waiting area for both students and parents. As I was walking to the waiting area, I saw a janitor but didn't think much of it. I put my bags down, but as I was about to sit down, I don't know, I just had a weird feeling, like he was watching me and my moves. I felt really uneasy, too uneasy to sit down, so I stayed standing up while holding my bags in case I had to run or throw them to save myself. As a reflex, I raised my head and looked at him. He continued to look at me. It was as if we were in a race where neither of us were looking away. Believe me when I say that I wanted to look away but couldn't. Maybe it was because I saw him as a threat, or maybe it was because I was too scared and uncomfortable to move. But whatever the case was, he made this weird smirk on his face, but since it was getting dark, I couldn't exactly tell what that was all about. I don't know how long we looked at each other, but I broke out of my trance when I saw my classmate from the previous year walking outside the building. In a desperate attempt, I waved at her and she saw it. But then I remember her coming in and walking towards me saying, "I saw someone waving," to which I replied with, "Oh, it was me. I thought that you left and was surprised to see you, so I waved at you. And you know, actually, if you don't mind, can you walk with me to the waiting area next to the security?" As we were walking outside, I looked back and saw the janitor still staring at me. I was wearing high heels, a short skirt, and a tight shirt, but it was an award show and we wanted to dress up. I don't think that this sort of stuff really happens to women because of what they wear, but I do think that he was staring at me because of my attire. At the waiting area next to the security, I was so anxious while waiting for my mum, thinking, what if he actually comes in here? Even when my mum came and when I got into the car, I was shaking slightly and wasn't in the headspace to speak about anything. So I told my mum that we got an award, but I was just too tired to speak. In any case, later on, I found out the weirdest thing. That janitor that I saw apparently didn't work at the school. I don't know if that means that it was just someone dressed up as a janitor or he was covering for someone else or something. Whatever the case, I will never forget the predatory look on his face. While taking a walk to the newsstand around the corner during the afternoon, Unfortunately, my neighbor died. I swear that I was gone not even 30 minutes too. I came back to EMTs and police swarming the building. It was kind of surreal how quickly it happened. I didn't know him super well, but I'd helped him carry in groceries, and he'd helped with my cat once, then told me in his super sassy old man way that he preferred dogs. After it happened, a bunch of residents were gathered into the common room, including the guy's roommate who had earbuds in listening to classical music, just staring into space with a blank look on his face. I assumed that he was traumatized. One of the neighbors, who's kind of a jerk, was joking about how the guy probably killed him. He started to walk over to ask him what happened, and I grabbed him, telling him not to be mean because the guy was clearly listening to classical music to calm down. We all agreed how horrific it'd be to lose a roommate and kind of scattered. The roommate was left in the common room until 11 p.m. while police waited for the body to be collected. They wouldn't let anyone back in. It's been somber since then, even though most of us didn't really know this guy. We see his roommate in the elevator and hall. He always has his headphones in. He doesn't acknowledge us, but just walks past. I've asked how he is, and he said fine. Which, okay, maybe he didn't want to talk to a total stranger, right? A few of the rest of us have chatted about the neighbor who passed and fun memories and stuff like that, but then yesterday I heard building staff talking about when they found him. Apparently, he was in nothing but a diaper. He was old, like I said, but he was laying on his sideways across the bed with his head almost to the floor, and his roommate was sitting calmly within sight at a table about 10 feet away. When the worker rushed to do CPR, she asked how long he'd been like that, and the roommate replied, "Oh, him? About 20 minutes. Now, it seems like it was natural causes, but the entire thing is obviously really bizarre upon hearing that. Several people also saw him shortly before this, fully clothed, and his roommate was just sitting there in the apartment with him while he died? I don't know. It's creepy, man, and I'm really glad that I'm moving out soon." This was right around when I was entering 8th grade. I remember all of the events vividly, like it happened yesterday too. This house that we had, it was amazing. It was a huge one-story house. The backyard was massive, bordering a riverbed too. There was a huge metal shed in the back that looked like it was used to work on semi-trucks. It was a 4-bedroom house, and my brother's room, which was technically a den, was converted into a room as well. It had long corridors to get to all other parts of the house. The kitchen was long like a hall lined with counters. To get to the 3 bedrooms on the other side of the house, we had to pass the living room and then walk down the long hallway that was L-shaped. My mother's room was at the end of this long hallway, which is where most of the worst events happened. I only know my other siblings' and parents' encounters because they told me as an adult, where before they didn't want to scare me, I guess, because I also had my own experiences that they knew about. So, it started with small things like just uneasy feelings, weird smells like baby powder, misplaced objects, knocking on doors early in the mornings, but the first major incident was when my uncle lived with us. We were sitting in the living room and we had one of those old school big screen TVs, you know, the ones that basically took up the whole corner of the room. There was my uncle's phone on top charging. Keep in mind, this is a flat surface, as my mum had decorations on top of this TV. But we were watching TV when suddenly we all watched the phone light up the corner of the room, super bright with just the screen. And before my uncle could move to check it, it flew off the TV. I don't mean like it slid, like it legit flew, as if someone had struck it and it just went flying across the room. We all got startled by that. My mum came running from the kitchen, and my uncle, which is about in his 30s at the time, explains exactly what happened. In shock, he said, "No one touched it. It lit up bright and then just freaking flew off the TV." We all kind of brushed it off, but it was nevertheless the first event of many. The next event kind of jumps from harmless to major, I think, but my brother was in the kitchen washing his plate from breakfast. when suddenly he explains feeling a real dreadful feeling. But he said that he ignored it, and as he was standing there, he said it felt like a gush of wind passed by him. He even said that he felt a tug on his shirt. Thinking that it was one of our many siblings, he spun around to see who was there, but there was no one. He was alone. Kind of freaked out, he told my mum what happened, since she's the most spiritual out of all of us. She's a big-time Christian. And stay with me here, because we're kind of going to jump around in timeliness based on harmless encounters to the worst ones. So, I remember getting ready for school one morning too, and I began to feel the anxiety and dreadful feeling again. I began to scan my room as I tied my shoes on the chair facing the doorway, and it was at this point that I caught a glimpse of an all-black hand wrap around the doorframe of my room. I jumped back, startled, and I saw a full black face peer from the corner of my doorframe. Its face was pasty black, its eyes were all black, and it was wearing an old feather hat sort of thing. I jumped up and screamed, and it quickly disappeared from the doorway. My mum came running in, and I explained with tears in my eyes about what I had just seen. She didn't play it off either, and she started to pray with me. And then finally, this is my last experience in this house, although my other siblings continued to have things happen to them. It was my bedtime, and I shared a room with my older brother. I didn't like sleeping alone after seeing whatever that thing was that was watching me tie my shoes that day. My brother had a late bedtime because he was in high school. I would go to bed first alone, and I remember being scared but falling asleep that night. I awoke to a silent, dark room at some stage, and for some reason, I couldn't move. I looked around the room from my top bunk bed, and we had these huge glass mirrors for closet doors, and in the reflection, I watched a creature crawl out from under the bed and hop onto the bottom bunk where my brother was sleeping. It was staring at me, and it had piercing red eyes. The only way that I can explain it too is that it looked like an evil monkey. I began to scream and cry because I couldn't move. My brother began to wake up. This thing hops off my brother's bed and quickly goes back under the bed. My brother jumps up and turns on the light. I explain what happened as I could move and talk now. He went to get my mum, and I remember being terrified, being left there alone in that room, well, while he went to get my mum. But she came in and we prayed, and after that, I think I went to bed and eventually I fell asleep. So, like I said, those are my experiences, but these next events are all from my siblings. So my sister often had vivid dreams of a body hanging from the window in the restroom, even to the point that she had a dream of my oldest brother hanging there. There was just something about that wall in the restroom and the window. Everyone felt uneasy about it, even before my sister ever mentioned the dreams about it. I remember being woken up by my brother at one point. He explained that he was in the restroom, and as he sat there, he said that he became fixated on the wall and the window. He began to feel panic and fear. He said the lights flickered, and he caught a glimpse of a noose hanging from the window frame, and he freaked out and quickly finished and ran out of the restroom. Now, I've never seen fear in any of my brother's eyes, but that night was different. He asked me to stay awake with him that night. I agreed, and we talked all night till the sun came up and there was light in the room. And we both fell asleep once enough light was in the room from outside that we felt safe. This next one is from the perspective of my older sister. My sister would often hear children playing in the hallway from her room, or inside of her room even. The sounds changed from just laughing and small voices to children eventually calling her name. She would explain when she took a shower that she would hear them outside of the door calling her. When she would be in her room, she would hear them calling from down the hallway. She was always freaked out, and still to this day says that she hated that house. This next one is from the perspective of my older brother. He was asleep when suddenly he was awoken by a loud noise. He explained that he tried to move but couldn't. The bed began to shake violently and the walls were cracking and shaking. He honestly thought that there was an earthquake for a moment, but he couldn't move. As he lay there helpless, he said that it was almost like a train was running through the room. Everything was shaking and there were sounds of a train running over tracks. He said that he closed his eyes and started to pray, and when he opened them, the room was back to normal. No cracks, no shaking, no noise. this same brother would have this same experience multiple times too, except every time was different. Sometimes he would hear trains, people talking like a busy train station, and other times he would hear children screaming and crying. To this day, he still has no explanation for what he heard or anything that he saw. The next one is half my perspective and half my sister-in-law's. For perspective too, we had a dining room which had a door to the front of the house. It was connected to the long kitchen, and the doorway to my brother's room was on the right. We also had a computer in the corner, and I remember watching a movie in my brother's room, which was the den converted into a room that I spoke about earlier. We all fell asleep on the floor, and I remember being woken up by some sort of a loud sound. I hear my sister-in-law saying, "What the heck is that?" I rolled over, and I hear that too. Everyone around us was asleep, but it sounded like somebody was on the computer typing on the keyboard, with the occasional clicking of the mouse even. She said go and check, and I was too afraid due to the past events, but I reluctantly checked to see nothing. The computer was off, and we both were freaked out, but after a while, we must have fallen back to sleep. This was the beginning of my siblings and parents seeing things too. One of my brothers were walking through the hallway and explained seeing a figure of a man standing in the doorway of my mum's room at the end of the hall. He said that it looked at him and reached for the doorknob and walked outside to the patio. This next one too was one of the scariest things to happen. My uncle was living with us still at the time, and I remember walking in the door with my parents. He immediately stops us and says, "You guys have demons in this house. There's something seriously wrong with this place." I remember the despair on my parents' face, knowing exactly what he meant too. He explains to us that coming home to an empty house, nobody was home, he walked in the doorway and looked down the hall, and he explained seeing two small children run from the corner of the L-shaped hall and into my sister's room, the one that always heard the children calling her and playing in the hallway. He was surprised because his logical explanation was that my mum left some of us to do something. He walked into my sister's room to ask what we were doing home alone, but he didn't find anyone in the room. He said that he checked everywhere too, convinced that there were children still at home. But just when he was about to give up, he suddenly heard laughing in the hallway. When he looked down to the hallway, he saw the same small children run from the bathroom into my room, only just catching a glimpse. He was now confused because he said that no one passed him to go back out of my sister's room. He said that he was upset and called our names to come out from hiding and stop playing with him. He searched the whole house, but found no one. He was home alone. I remember sitting there too, scared listening to this because the last room that they entered was mine. But the next story is my mother's story. She explained that my oldest brother, who works nights, would sneak into her room in the early morning and sit on her bed to let them know that he was home, and they would get up and drink a coffee and just talk sometimes. She explained being woken up by the sound of her door opening, and she said that she had a feeling that it was not my brother though, and instead of my brother coming straight to the bed, she heard her cupboards open and someone sort of rummaging through them. Then they closed, and she heard footsteps heading toward her bed. Then she felt someone sit on the bed. She turned around to say hi to my brother, but when she did, nobody was there. She explained that there was an impression on the bed though, as if someone was actually sitting there. My mother, being the God-fearing woman that she was, laughed and began to pray. That's when she said the impression disappeared and she heard footsteps leaving her room. The next story is the same brother who had something pull on his shirt in the kitchen that night. It's the same thing. He was washing his dish, except we were all in the kitchen cleaning up from breakfast, when suddenly he said that he felt the gush of wind again and something pulled him harder this time. He turned around to see and remembers getting up off the floor with everyone around him. But from my perspective, he just blacked out. He collapsed onto the floor with no warning. We even had the paramedics come that night, but in the end he was fine. No one could explain what happened either, and it was weird. But this house was something evil. We always knew that something was wrong with it, but we finally had the answers. We were all in the living room watching TV one morning when I remember my mum opening the front door. She moved her attention to some random guy standing in the front yard. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to scare you. I used to live here when I was a kid." My mum said, "Oh, you did?" He said, "Yeah, like 20 years ago." My mum said, "Can I ask you some questions?" And he said, "What do you want to know? But before you ask, yes, the house is haunted or cursed," he said with a scared look. My mum, shocked, asked him to explain, and he began to explain all the experiences that we've been having. My mum was pretty shocked by this and says, "Well, what about the knocking or the baby powder?" He says, "Oh, that was my mum. She had a heart attack in the back restroom. Don't worry, she would knock on our doors in the morning to let us know that she was still around, since apparently she did that when she was alive. She would wear a lot of baby powder for some reason too, like it would fluff off her when she sat down, and which explains the knocking earlier in the mornings and the powder smell throughout the house, I guess. But he said you would have to be careful because there's an American native chief here as well." Well, we all said, "What?" He pulled out his phone and pulls up a picture. It's a picture of a developed photo, and it shows some people on the patio at a party. They're standing in the front of the bar that we have in the backyard, and behind them is a huge figure with a chief hat on his head, feathers and all, except his face is completely black, and so are his eyes. The man explained that there are several ghosts and demons in this house, apparently. He even explained that they had a theory that someone hung themselves in the restroom, which also explains the dreams that my sister would have and my brother seeing the rope that day. In the end, we thanked him, and he rode his bike away. We never did see that guy again or figure out where he was from or anything. And he was riding a bike, which was weird, but he couldn't have lived too far, I guess. But we never did see him again. After a few years, we moved out of that house. I was really happy too, because all the experiences ended once we moved. But I remember being in high school and my friend was talking about how he just moved across the street. He explained the house and it was the same one. I warned him and he laughed at me and said nothing has happened yet. But a few weeks later, he came up to me and said he believed me. He said that he was in the fridge getting milk this morning and no one was home, just him, and someone came super close to his ear and he could feel their breath on his neck, and they said in a low, deep voice, "What are you doing here?" Throughout the school year, he would tell me all the things that would happen there, which actually in turn were way worse than what we ever experienced. I believe that whatever my mum was doing was protecting us there, which I'm thankful for. Obviously, there's a lot more to this and many more experiences, but these were by far the most standoutish, I guess you could say. In the end, I know it sounds a bit weird, but I guess I'm grateful for the experiences. It's definitely shaped my perspective on life and things in life, but I'm also very grateful that I no longer live there. So I've had a stalker for about 4 years now. He was never aggressive or sent me proper threats, so stubborn as I am, I did my best to ignore him and not give him the satisfaction of showing him any fear. To be honest, after a while, I also wasn't even scared anymore, since he almost never came close to me. I know being stalked can affect people severely, even in a case like mine, and that's totally valid, but I guess I just got lucky and was never really psychologically affected by it. His stalking behavior mostly just consisted of sending me letters and gifts, such as photos of my own apartment building from the outside, things that he dug out of my trash can, and so on. I called the police many times, but they weren't able to, or really tried, to be honest, to catch or identify him. But about 3 weeks ago, I discovered the German version of the subreddit r/IMA, and thought that people might want to know about what it's like to have a stalker. Since I barely use any social media, aside from Reddit, and have no personally identifying information here, I didn't think that he'd ever see it. One person even asked, "Does he know that you're putting him on blast on Reddit?" And I answered, maybe it would make him angry, maybe he'd be turned on. I don't know, and I don't really care. Well, I know the real answer now. He did see it, and he did not like it. Like I said, he was never aggressive and never came close to me. The closest that I know of was when he sent me a picture of myself unlocking my apartment door, taken from the corner of the steps above. Sorry if that doesn't make sense. I really don't know how else to explain it, but I consider myself a pretty vigilant person, and I'm thinking that he might have hid a camera there instead of being there to take the photo himself. I think I would have noticed him if he did. Anyway, I don't know how he got wind of the AMA, but he did. The next week was quiet, no letters, and I didn't see him anywhere. Then he left me letters with printed out questions and my answers from the subreddit. He also left me a long, hateful letter towards my boyfriend about an issue that I had posted. His letters were never hateful like that before, though he never seemed happy with my boyfriend. He wrote about how I should share the spotlight with him since I got so much attention thanks to him. A few days later, I got a gift, but this time he didn't leave it in my mailbox or at my car like he usually did. No, this time he left it inside the apartment building right in front of my door. I didn't take it inside my apartment, but opened it outside. It was a pretty big box, which was also unusual, and it was taped shut. As I'm sharing this, I realized that it wasn't a good idea at all and could have ended very badly for me, but luckily he didn't send me something terrible or anything. He did, however, send me several zip ties, a roll of tape, a TV remote with most buttons picked off, a pack of band-aids with a few used ones, and a framed picture of me. I could tell the picture was taken a few days ago, and my boyfriend was next to me but cut out of the photo. The frame was shattered, and the package was full of glass shards, clearly more than just what could have fallen out of the frame too, and they were also intentionally put inside the crumbled newspaper that was stuffed in there and to keep it all in place and stuff. Anyway, I called the cops right away and gave it to them. They were more concerned this time, finally, thankfully, and told me that they'd send patrol cars more frequently. He didn't show up or leave me any letters or gifts for about another week and a half after that. But 8 days ago, it started again. I found letters in my mailbox where he wrote about how he wasted his time on me, how I haven't been appreciating his effort, how he was wrong about me being special. 5 days ago, I left my apartment in the morning and heard a crunch sound as I stepped on my doormat. He had put broken glass under it in the night. I went off to work because I was in a hurry and was just going to make my boyfriend call the police, but then I found my car had also been vandalized. The sides were scratched, the lights were smashed, and the windshield had a phrase painted on it. "It's time soon. Miss my last name." I went back inside and called the cops myself. They found the same phrase on a note under the doormat. This time they really took me seriously, which might have been because I was just, angry at this point, which I made very clear. If for some reason you're like me and just too stubborn to be afraid of a stalker like mine, then all of this, the letters, the gifts, the photos, even the glass under my doormat, are just really annoying and inconvenient. But my car was useless to me now, and the threat, it scared even me. I did, however, have a dash cam in my car, and it caught everything. The police said that they would take the footage as evidence, even though the dash cam footage wasn't of high quality, and I had given them photos of him that were just as good before, but they said that it wasn't enough. And they told me that they'll look into it further and promised to send more patrol cars again. Then it was quiet for 2 more days. Until 2 days ago. Someone rang the doorbell at just after 4 a.m. My boyfriend and I got up, but we were both hesitant, but I saw blue lights outside, and just as I got up, I heard them shouting, "This is the police, please open the door." They told us that they were called by one of the downstairs neighbors, who came home from his night shift about an hour earlier, and heard someone else enter the building after them before the door fell shut. My neighbors actually know of my situation, and I've asked them to make sure that they don't let strangers into the building. This neighbor then went into his own apartment and looked through the peephole. We have motion-activated lights in the stairway, so he waited to see if they turned back on, and they did. Then he saw a middle-aged man walk upstairs. Above this neighbor, there are only me and my boyfriend and a single mum with 3 kids who probably won't be getting any visitors at 3 a.m. So, naturally, he called the police. They came, and they found my stalker 1/2 floor above me on the stairs. He should have been able to see the cop car since there's a little window up there and they had their lights on, but he either missed them or wanted to get caught. They found a pocket knife on him and he confessed to being my stalker right away. He was finally caught. They got him. It took 4 years, a provocative Reddit post, and one very vigilant and caring neighbor, but he's finally done. For now, at least, he's facing several charges, and I've collected every single piece of evidence over the past 4 years. I don't know what kind of outcome I can expect, but for now, at least, I finally have some peace.